Great.
So just going to do late.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Swampscott School Committee regular session and joint meeting with the Select Board and the Finance Committee. Today is Thursday, January 23rd. It is 6 p.m. We are coming to you from Swampscott High School, room B129. I call this meeting from the school committee into order. Mary Ellen.
I call the select board into order.
Great. And from the Finance Committee?
Does not have a quorum.
Okay, so we'll wait. You guys can hang out and join us. All right. Before we do the Pledge of Allegiance, if I could, as we stand, if you are so able, can we have just a quick moment of silence for Swampscott High School longtime coach and athletic director, Mr. Frank DeFelice. Just a quick moment of silence, please. Could all stand. Thank you very much. Now if we could just say the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We have some regular business to conduct first before we get into the FY26 recommended budget presentation. We'll let everyone introduce themselves as we go forward, but from the school committee side, again, my name is Glenn Pastor. I'm the current chair of the school committee. If I could just ask everybody to go, just introduce yourselves, please.
Suzanne Wright,
Amy
longtime member.
Amy O'Connor.
John Jantis.
Pam Angelakis.
Cheryl Herrick Stella.
Jason Kalishman.
Karen Marshall.
Okay, Sam, introduce yourself.
Sam Wallace.
I'm the Lovely student rep.
Great, thank you very much. All right, anything for the love of learning today?
No, not tonight.
Okay, great, thank you. Committee comments, Karen, anything?
Nope, I'm ready to just get into it.
Great, Suzanne,
Same.
Amy?
I just have a quick thing. I want to say thank you to the head of the teachers union and the head of the ESPs and the head of the tutors, as well as our superintendent, for agreeing to participate in interest-based bargaining. I think it is a game changer for our district in terms of actually getting things accomplished. So I want to thank everybody for doing that.
Great, thank you, Amy. John?
Just very quickly, glad everyone's here tonight to hear the presentation.
Great. I really have nothing to add for general committee comment. I'll add a few comments as we go forward. Yeah, thank you very much. I always forget. Noel, you're up.
Nothing too crazy. It's midterms week at the high school, so
Okay.
that's going well. It's relatively new, but it's very smooth sailing.
Great, excellent, and thank you again for coming. Sam?
No comments.
All right, thank you very
No
much.
college updates?
No, I'm still waiting. It won't be till like March, April.
Seems like forever.
Yeah.
All right, we're all in bated breath for both Noel and Sam. All right, reports and discussions.
So my superintendent's report is really in two categories tonight. Obviously, the budget with the director of the assistant superintendent of finance and operations. But prior to that, we do have a couple of presentations from our facilities director, Max Casper. The UU license agreement that we've been talking about for weeks in terms of getting 45 parking spaces for the Swampscott Elementary School to alleviate the parking situation so that parents who volunteer or people that are there for meetings will have plenty of parking. And then a Swampscott Elementary School project update, a closeout project update. So I'll let you take it away, Max.
Thank you, Superintendent Angelakis. Yeah, I'm going to start off discussing the license agreement with the UU. This is something we've been negotiating with a small contingent from the UU board, and we really have to say, thank you to Evan Katz and Tom Billings. They were really awesome to negotiate with and work through, and really were collaborative, and we really appreciated the process with them. We feel as though the UU is being a really great neighbor in their agreement here, and I know the board has the agreement. I'm not going to run through the whole thing, but if you have any questions, it is a license agreement, so it is revocable, but there is very little that the town is giving in return. We will be obligated to do snow removal in the easement and license area. We were already doing it in the easement area, so it's a little bit additional for the parking spaces. The license really covers the parking spaces that are adjacent to the easement. If you know the UU lot, there's really like 3 sections. This we refer to as the lower lot, the closest to the wetlands in the field at the school. So when you exit through the easement, onto the easement from the school property, that's the lower lot. So it's about 45 spots. It'll be for staff, and it's really needed at the school. We've known, since the project was formulated, that the parking was going to be really tight on the site. Swampscott's a dense community. We didn't have the ability to put hundreds of parking spots on the site, so we really had to maximize the programming on the site. We've been using the middle school, but as it gets colder and the teachers aren't loving that concept, so having this parking lot right adjacent is a huge benefit, and will decrease the congestion on the site. It'll free up visitor parking and additional parking on the site for visitors, because the parking for the teachers is one thing that's been challenging, but another thing is we fill the lot, and then anybody that comes during the day has nowhere to go either, and they're driving around and parking in the neighborhood. So it really is going to provide relief across the board. And we're really happy to get to the finish line here. We've had a couple snowstorms. We were trying to get it done before the snow, but nothing major. With a big snowstorm, it would really, really be challenging with our current parking arrangements.
But the storms considerately happened on weekends.
Yes.
So we were lucky.
Thank you for ordering that, Superintendent. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Yeah, so really, the timing couldn't be any better, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Of course, town council did negotiate it with the UU's council, so it's fully vetted by town council.
How many parking spaces does this bring us to now?
In the UU or total?
Total.
There's about 80, it depends on how you count them on the site, but let's say 80 to 90, and this is 45, so about 135, 40 total, 140 total.
And how much does that free up for the parents? Because I know that the school committee heard about that a couple of times. Sorry.
Well, I mean, if you think of, we will now be able to park 45 staff in the UU lot each day. It's important to note that the UU parking is not for community and parent parking, it's for staff parking. But that will free up considerable parking on site. So we will no longer have the perimeter of the site parked by staff, so all of those would be freed up, and we would anticipate all the visitor parking, EV parking, not to be full on a daily basis.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lori, you must be very excited about this change.
This is a big win for everybody.
Yeah.
Especially, obviously, our staff and our teachers. Max and I wanted to do a big celebration. It means a lot to us. It really does.
Great.
And thanks to Max and Superintendent Angelakis, and definitely Tom Billings and Evan Katz. They were unbelievable during this.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Max. Obviously, Superintendent, thank you for all your hard work. Anyone have any questions about this particular topic? All right.
Great.
Continue on.
Would you like to vote on it now, or?
I think vote on it now.
Yes.
I don't think I can wait another second.
All right, sorry about that. Then can someone please make a motion to accept the UUGL licensing agreement?
I'll make the motion.
Someone second, please.
I'll second.
All in favor? Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
Yay! Just
Yeah.
don't ask for balloon arches. We're just about done on the balloon arches.
And I should mention, there was a corollary agreement that the select board approved last night, which was related to the insurance coverage. So thank you to the select board for also taking that in their agenda and moving that forward.
Great.
So can I just ask a clarifying question on behalf of SES staff? When
Yeah.
are they allowed to?
The UU is meeting on Monday night, their board, so we expect them to approve it on Monday night. We have some insurance documents to get in order, but we expect it will be at some point next week.
Okay, thank you.
Great. It's great news.
Yeah, it is.
Very great news. Okay.
Okay, and I have one short presentation as well about the elementary school that I am going to bring up now. Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to, Joe, I can get that bigger, right? Oh, hold on. Oh, I see what's happening.
There you go.
I'm sorry, this is not the right thing. Sorry, bear with me, just trying to get the right presentation up here.
Max, take your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, there is a quorum of finance committee. You
Oh,
can
great.
Fill the break with them.
All right, so while Max, we're waiting, from the
Sure.
Finance Committee, would you like to call yourselves to order?
No, the finance committee's meeting is called to order.
Great, thank you.
Motion,
Motion.
second. All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, for keeping this going.
Do they want to, oh, they're not interested?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you again. This is a short presentation. It was such a whirlwind at the end of the summer, opening of the school year. We really never had a chance to kind of take a breath and give an update on the closeout of the elementary school project. So, now that we're, many months into the year and, really still at the tail end of the project closeout, wanted to take the opportunity to walk through that and give you an update on that. So this is a really awesome picture. This is a real picture of the front of the building. This is not a rendering. There was professional photographs taken by LBA there throughout this presentation. So, it's something. So just wanted to highlight a few things about the project. I think one of the things we should be most proud of is the schedule. And I look back at the dates for the presentation, and I highlighted some here. The Stanley School was demolished in September 2022. RGC CTA broke ground in December of 22. The ceremony was actually in December. And we had substantial completion less than 2 years later on August 9th, 2024. And convocation was held at SES on August 26th, 2024, and school started 2 days later. Remarkable timeline. We also simultaneously had a roadway improvements project. We rebuilt Whitman Road entirely at the tail end of the project, added sidewalks, brand new on Whitman Road, did multiple ADA pedestrian ramps, all with the help of the DPW community development. It was really a partnership project, and changed Orchard Road to a one-way to allow for proper traffic flows, all gearing up for the traffic on that first day of school for pickup and drop-off. And the first day didn't go great, but then it got a lot better, and it really was that engineering and that implementation. And the traffic today is really good. It's still a lot, but it's a really short period of time. The speed with which they clear out at pickup is unbelievable now. What is it, Laurie, 15 minutes, if that?
If that.
Yeah. And, with the middle school right next door, to have no conflict with those two sort of large populations entering and exiting in very close proximity, we really credit that to the structuring of the school day, which was thought out, and the middle school starts about a half an hour later and dismisses a half an hour later. So that all went pretty well. So wanted to highlight that, as well as the sustainability of the project. This is really something the town should be proud of. It's a LEED Gold building. We're still getting the final certification with MSBA, you're required to be LEED Silver, and we're LEED Gold. And it's really something. As most people know, it's a fully electric building. That is, from a climate perspective, it's really great. That's what climate leadership is really all about these days, is electrifying and decreasing your energy usage. There's not a gas line to the building. So we have a backup generator that runs off of diesel fuel that keeps the building going if we were to have an outage, but there's no fossil fuel usage in the building on a day-to-day basis. And with that, we have geothermal HVAC system. Big sections of the building are heated and cooled through a geothermal HVAC system. There's over 80 wells out in the front of the building that power that system. So it's pretty great. And really, the most important thing, and this isn't my side of it so much, but it is the most important. The educational spaces are awesome. I mean, this picture here, again, this is a real picture of one of the swing spaces. I think the kindergarten classrooms are the things that, whenever I see those, the size, the bathroom in the room. I've been in Hadley a lot recently, and to think that our kids were there a year ago and they're here today, it's astounding. It's really something else. And really, it's a thank you to the community and the neighborhood. The community really got behind this project. When the votes happened, it wasn't even close, right? It was really well supported, and this is after a failed vote, 10 years ago now. And that's amazing. And the neighborhood, the neighborhood, not everyone in the neighborhood always supported this project, but they were burdened by it, and they ended up being good neighbors, and they worked through us, and it wasn't easy. They put up with a lot of things, but ultimately, we were able to partner with most of the neighbors and work with them and mitigate the impact on them and get through it, and we really do owe them a thank you, because without their participation, we wouldn't have got through it. And we blasted ledge for months on end. There was really a lot of impact to the people that lived right around the school, and that needs to be acknowledged. Finally, I wanted to point out some I'm sorry. Before I get to my final slide, I did want to talk a little bit about some ongoing items. Like, this is not over. The punch list is still going on. This was at the end of the project. We had over 5,000 items that the GC and subcontractors were responsible to close out. We're down to 27. That's a lot less. We're still commissioning. We're in final stages of commissioning. Commissioning is a wide-ranging word. It's the envelope of the building. It's a lot of things. At this point, it's mostly like the final HVAC things. We're still working through HVAC items, getting final balancing, working through issues with the commissioning, and we're moving into a post-occupancy commissioning phase with the commissioning agent that they'll be with us for a year, kind of watching how this building is operated. And we have warranty items. It's just sort of part of such a big construction project. There's things that come up. Every week, almost every day, there's something that we're finding that we need to address. Luckily, the contractor is responsible for a year for basically everything that is not sort of caused by our misuse or regular use. In the HVAC system, it's important to note, has a 2-year warranty. So for 2 years, we have the subcontractor to kind of work through issues with the HVAC system, and I think that's really important. We've been working through issues with parking and snow removal. Parking is going to get a lot better because of the last agenda item. Snow removal, we've had a couple storms now. It's getting better. There's certainly some learning curves. We've been really concerned about the plowing, how to plow the site, but Garrett's been doing a really, really great job, and the DPW's been collaborating and helping us with the sanding, but we know we're still working through some things. Most of the the front of the building is southerly facing, so we don't get sun. So it's a little bit tricky with the walkways, and this last storm was particularly hard with the rain, followed by the snow, followed by the freezing cold, so the icing issues. But again, we're working through that, as well as.
While I take a breath, I just think it's important to acknowledge Max in this process. I just want to thank and it's very important that you receive some credit. You are one of the most responsive teammates I've ever worked with. To that punch list alone, but even on a day Superintendent Angelakis told me that Max was on site at SMS and SHS, and, you know, our snow removal needs, I have to, you know, talk to Garrett that day. Max suddenly showed up and I was like, I thought you were busy all day. He still makes time for us, no matter what is on his plate. And I think everyone should know that. Like, he is an unbelievable teammate and so committed to SES, so thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. It's kind. Yeah, so just the last few sort of ongoing issues that we're working through. National Grid and utility costs is still a developing item. National Grid is still actually kind of working out some final issues with one of the transformers and the metering, so we haven't got like true costs on half of our electricity usage yet, so that's something that we're still that is still developing. And then we have some upcoming solar projects that we're really excited about. There's one that we're under contract with already with Consigli to put solar on the roof of the building. It was slowed down a little bit by a National Grid study of their infrastructure. We're expecting that to kick off in the spring, and then there's a larger project that we're considering that may be at town meeting for capital for the parking lot solar, which would be, both of those would cut into the electric costs of the building substantially. So all of those things, the commissioning process that we're still wrapping up and heading into post-occupancy commissioning, the warranty period, the unknowns surrounding some of the utility usage, it does mean that we're a ways off from operating this building under normal conditions, how we will kind of year in and year out. You know, we don't have all of our service contracts in place because of the warranties, you know, the things that we need to, we do, but it's, you know, it's not, this isn't regular how we're kind of using this building today. It's gonna take probably 2 or 3 years before we kind of settle into the normal operation, all of our service contracts fully in place, all of our providers understanding all of the utility costs. And finally, this is a good slide. I wanted to talk about some of the financial benefits that the town has reaped from the project, and a lot of this was actually unanticipated when we kicked off the project, and a nice surprise, some of these. The town received an additional MSBA reimbursement of over $5.3 million. This was about the timing of the project. We bid this project during an incredibly inflationary period in the entire economy, and especially construction. We had a really deep VE process because of that timing coming out of the pandemic. And we were able, you know, with a bumped up contingency to get a bid that we could move forward, and that was exciting. And luckily, you know, MSBA recognized this situation that we were in, and they were adjusting their formulas at the time for the per square footage reimbursement rate. And a small group of towns and cities that had bid projects in a certain time frame were given an adjustment to their reimbursement rate, and it resulted in, again, over $5.3 million additional from our MSBA reimbursement, which was already, you know, roughly half of the total project cost. We have a national and grid incentive. This we were anticipating because we were in a program with National Grid from an early stage. The number kept growing as their program developed and as our building developed, and ultimately us putting in the geothermal heat pumps really drove this incentive way up. It comes in 2 phases. One has already been received, over $890,000. And then after we use the building for a year and show the efficiency is being realized, there'll be an additional payment from National Grid of $480,000 sometime in 2026. Then there's upcoming anticipated reimbursements. I should speak to one thing before I get into this, because there's some things going on at the federal level that kind of have the potential to impact some of these, some less than other. But there was an executive order signed related to the IRA. I actually spoke with our consultant today, Energy Tax Savers, who has been guiding us through this IRA direct pay process. It's really like a tax return process, which is not something that towns typically do, but that's how direct pay works. And it's for geothermal solar projects. For us, at least. There's some other things, but that's how it's going to impact us. And I'm sorry, I didn't really finish that thought, but what the tax advisor said to us was they do not anticipate what's going on at the federal level to impact any of our projects, especially the geothermal, because it's already in place. The rooftop solar, if we're able to put it in place this year, also is unlikely to be affected. It would really take an act of Congress to actually pull back the IRA, and that's not what has happened. It's just an executive order. The solar canopy, which is more in the future, would be the one that has more risk. We don't think it has a high level of risk, but just because it isn't happening imminently, who knows what's going to happen, with Congress. Like they could pull it back. There's a lot of reasons why people think they ultimately won't, but it's just something to be aware of. So basically, what all of these IRA reimbursement direct pay items boil down to is we get 25.5% back on any eligible costs associated with geothermal and solar projects that we own. So when we chose geothermal for this project, this program didn't exist. We did not know we were going to get this reimbursement. It was an incredibly pleasant surprise. So we've gone through a long process with our engineers, with our tax advisors, to identify what the eligible costs are. It ends up that we have about $9 million in eligible geothermal costs. We'll get back about 25.5% of that. Comes out to $2.25 million. We are on the cusp of filing that tax return. We've already pre-filed. We could file as early as next week, and that money could be realized as soon as 45 days after we file. So that's coming soon. And then same concept for both the rooftop solar and the potential future canopy solar. 25.5% of the eligible project costs be $190,000 roughly for the rooftop solar, $420,000 for the solar canopies. Most of this, again, unanticipated. It's not the same analysis, right? The MSBA money, the geothermal, those are things we had already bought that just we get money back. It's really, really great. It's a little bit of a different story with the National Grid. We kind of were in that program anticipating at least some of that money, and the solar canopy hasn't even happened yet. So while that will be part of the analysis as to whether or not the town wants to advance that project. But all in all, this is a pretty astounding number. The anticipated incentives reimbursements above what was expected from the original MSBA grant is over $9.5 million. On a $100 million project that the state already paid half of,
Right.
It's pretty awesome. So I think it's really, really good news.
Fantasticness.
Thank you, Max.
You're welcome.
Yes. Yay, us.
Yeah.
Yay, Max.
Yay.
Great.
Any
Yeah, I was going to say, any questions? Go ahead.
Max, it's a little bit sort of tangent to this, but I know that you've had difficulty hiring over the last few years, and because of your leadership, we did a revamp of the contract and to a more accurate wage table. Has that had the intended impact that you were hoping for?
No, I think it has. We're fully staffed with our custodians right now, and when we're going out to shovel and snowblow, to have the full staffing at each building has been great. So I think we're at a place with our staffing that's better than I've seen in years. So I think there may be a connection there. Yes.
Good. Well, thanks for your leadership on that.
You're welcome.
Just have a quick question.
Okay.
So Max, just going back to your reimbursement discussion, so I'm just curious, are those something that are paid in lump sum payments, or do we receive that money over a period of years? Do you know how that works?
Are you talking about the IRA specifically?
Well, you mentioned a whole bunch of them, but we can
Yeah,
talk about
so,
the IRA.
yeah, I can break it down. It's different for each one. The MSBA money is already been received. The National Grid money, a portion of it, more than half of it has already been received. The other segment, the 400,000 segment, comes a year after we start our post-occupancy period, so that'll be sometime in 2026. And then the IRA reimbursements are all tied to essentially a tax return, where we're filing on a fiscal year basis. You can file as a municipality either on a fiscal year basis or a calendar year basis. Because of when we took occupancy of the building, it was prudent to file on a fiscal year basis. And then again, I think I said this earlier, once you file, you then get a tax return, right? Just like you and I would, and that should be a lump sum payment from the federal government.
Right. Karen?
I don't know, are we gonna talk about like where that money goes or who uses it?
That was
I'm
my
sure
question.
that's what everybody wants.
That was
to
my
know.
question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard that the MSBA money is for paying down debt, correct?
Yep.
So that's sort of already spoken for, but I haven't heard uses for the other monies. And I don't know if anybody has any answers to that.
You want me to answer?
Either one.
Okay.
So the National Grid money just comes in at like a miscellaneous receipt to the town. So it's just revenue coming into the town. No restrictions on use per se, but you have to wait till it falls to free cash. The IRA money, the federal government didn't have a lot of restrictions on it, but the state came in and put a lot of restrictions on it, unfortunately. And so that, similar to the MSBA money, can only be used for something on-site, like if we were going to do something on-site, or to pay down debt as well for the specific project. So it's similar to the MSBA in that it's restricted to this building project specifically.
So that basically translates to the pay down of the debt coming sooner than later.
Yes. Which, is
Significant.
good for the town.
Significant for
It
taxpayers.
reduces, right, interest costs and whatnot.
Could it help pay for the canopy project, or can it be used for like is that the same project, or is that a new project?
I don't,
Oh, that was loud. That's sorry. Yeah, we checked on that, and because that's a new project and it's not part of the actual building, they were not including that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thank you, Amy. That was my question as well. Karen, Max, thank you so much for all your hard work. It's, for someone who sat here 10 years ago and, licking my wounds, the building is amazing. There's always going to be something that has to get done, right? There's just a ton of little feet walking around there every day. So thank you very much for all you do, and thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you.
Thanks, Max.
All right. All right. Before I turn it over to the superintendent for the finance and operations, just a couple points. Before I start, just because we have such a vast audience tonight, could I just ask both boards, the select board and the finance committee, can you guys introduce your people on the board and the people on the committee, just so everybody kind of puts a name to a face? Mary Ellen, you want to start?
Yep, so I'm Mary Ellen Fletcher, I'm the chair of the select board.
David Grishman, Select Board.
Doug Thompson, Select Board.
Sorry.
Danielle Leonard, select board.
Gino Cresta, Interim Town Administrator.
Okay.
Katie Arrington, FinCom.
Eric Schneider, FinCom.
Vice Chair. I'm Naomi Drebin on the FinCom also.
I'm Jared Guthrie on the Finance Committee.
I'm Tara Mislinski on FinCom.
Greg, are you able to unmute yourself?
Greg McDonald, FinCom.
Oh, hey, Greg, how are you? Didn't see you there.
No worries.
Oh, go ahead, thank you. All right, thank you. So just a couple quick points. Just, the greatest thing about tonight is all three boards are going to hear actual information. We're not going to be playing, telephone tag. We're not going to be saying, well, Glenn said this, or Amy said that, or Mary Ellen said this. We're all going to hear it at the same time. And that's a plus for all concerned. We're all here for really one reason, and that's for the love of this community. We may agree, we may agree to disagree, and that's perfectly fine. I do ask that we do so with the utmost respect to the speakers, to the questioners, to all three committees. I think this is going to be a very powerful presentation. As far as questions go, we will let Ms. Stella do the presentation. The school committee may or may not have some questions. If anyone out there has a question, either the select board or finance committee, before you ask, I think what we hear Cheryl say a lot to us is, I'm going to get there in a couple minutes, but feel free to stop and let's have these conversations. And then the last thing I want to ask, just because there's so many people here, can I ask everybody just to shut your phone off and just put it away? If you do have a phone call, you do have a text, could you just please step out? There's just a lot of people here. It's really hard for us to hear up here, and that would just be really respectful. I appreciate that. And with that, Ms. Stella, Ms. Angelakis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you. So as the school committee knows, we have a strategic plan that goes through 2026. That strategic plan has our priorities and our core work at its center. And so our priorities include family engagement, family partnerships, MTSS. So these district goals are tied very closely to our strategic plan, as I said, that goes through FY26. One of the first goals is to keep our part-time kindergarten aides. There was a time where we didn't have aides in those classrooms at all. Then we went to full-time. Then we went back to half-time. We fought to get the half-time back. We want to maintain those half-times. The littles are coming in with a different skill set than they did years ago, and having those part-time kindergarten aides that don't cost anything for health insurance is really important. We're on a curriculum cycle where we purchase new programs for the curriculum in various stages, and one of those goals this year is to purchase a new literacy program for grades 6 through 12. We had done K to 5, and now we need to complete that cycle and do 6 through 12. Our goal is to add a co-teaching model at the 4th grade. We have co-teaching at middle school and at high school, but we have a special educator and a general educator, and that really is to the benefit of the students. We want to strengthen our multi-tiered systems, the support system. I did link, this has been here for the last several years. I did link what is MTSS, but basically it's a tiered model of instruction where you target, we're using data, what the kids need, and then specifically there's whole group instruction, and then there's tier 2 and tier 3 where we target those kids that really need that instruction. We definitely need to reduce the class size in 5th grade from 25 to 26 currently to 2021. Build our After Dark and Pathways programs. Our Pathways programs are our CTE, Career and Technical Education programs, and our After Dark program is where our students come to Swampscott High School, and then they leave and go to Essex North Shore Technical School to do CTE programs over there. One of the things that I'm most proud of is the fact that we've brought back these different pathways for our students and these different programs, and we need to build on them and maintain them. Expand our family engagement and partnership work. This has been a cornerstone of Dr. Bacon's work prior to her leaving, and all of the buildings and the principals are working on this. For example, the family engagement that was a goal for us this year was the principals reaching out to all new students, either coming into the middle school or all new students coming into the district, making phone calls home. So that's really important work for us. And then, as I said earlier, our core work, our community of belonging opportunity for for all, respect for diversity and equity for everyone is our core work, but it also is our district strategy. And again, doing that DEI work within the buildings and embedding it into all of our instruction is really important to us. So those are the overarching goals to this budget that's being presented to you today.
So I thought it might be helpful just to step everyone through what our process is in the school department and our overall budget timeline. Budget instructions and a memo was sent out to the leadership team October 28th. The school committee met on November 7th as a budget subcommittee of the whole to discuss their goals. Budgets were due back from our leadership team before Thanksgiving. We have many meetings throughout November and December, and we really work through their budget requests, ask questions, really think holistically as a team about the overall budget. We presented draft budget numbers to, again, the budget subcommittee of the whole December 19th. We had a tri-chair meeting to go over that initial budget on the 23rd. We continued to revise and look at our budget throughout the end of December. We had another budget subcommittee of the whole January 9th to present some revised numbers to them. And then we had another tri-chair meeting January 10th and January 16th to again go through our revisions and where the school budget stood. The full budget book was sent out to the school committee on January 15th, and then it was also distributed to members of the tri-chair on January 20th. And then,
Cheryl, can I just interrupt? Just so everybody knows, and it's a lot of vernacular here, and for those who are watching who may have not heard that, a tri-chair meeting is a meeting of the three chairs of the school committee, the select board, and the finance committee. God, sorry to interrupt.
yeah, no worries. And so next steps with our budget is this meeting tonight. And then there's a potential vote and a public hearing of the budget by the school committee on February 6th. And then per the charter, we must send the budget to the town administrator by February 15th.
Can I just confirm, I want to make sure that everybody has the budget book and not just the chairs? That sounds like it. Okay, good. Do you guys have it? Finance committee? Okay.
Just to walk you through where we started with our budget and how we got to the 4.79% increase. The initial budget requests that came back from our leadership team were an 8.98% increase over FY25, or $2.9 million. The superintendent, myself, and leadership team, we all met, we went through that, and we were able to reduce that down to a 7.52% over FY24, or a $2.4 million increase. Then we really looked at our revolving funds. Last year, we made a concerted effort to look at all of our fees across the district and see where it made sense to increase those fees. So we did for athletics, building use, and then our extended day program. While the fees, we don't set the fees, our enrollment has increased significantly. So we're seeing a much higher level of revenue come through our extended day program. So we were able to take some of the expenditures that were in our operating budget and move them into a revolving fund, which got us to the 7.4%. We continue to revise this budget. A second draft was recommended by the superintendent and the school committee, which had further reductions, and then was presented to tri-chair on January 13th with a 4.79% increase, or a $1.55 million increase over FY25. As we went through this process, we really looked at everything: class sizes, what are our student requirements, how can we gain efficiencies with our budget, where can we make reductions or share resources. So one of the things that we did look at was the physical education offerings at the high school, and we knew that that was something that we wanted to try and expand. And so in meeting with the leadership team, we found a way to actually utilize some of our resources at the elementary school to come up to the high school, teach one class a week, and expand some of our offerings, which allowed us to use some of our additional staff without having to add an additional FTE here, but still meet some of the needs that we're looking to meet. The technology department also has some upcoming restructuring for FY '26, which helps us see some budget savings as well. We had a large number of budget requests that we considered, but we just, really couldn't fund this year when we looked at everything. One was a request for a psychologist at the high school. We really dug into this a lot, looked at our current students, caseloads, and at this time, it just didn't support a full additional psychologist. However, if student needs change or caseloads change, this is something that we will have to reassess in the future. There was a request to take a 0.5 math tutor and make them a 1.0 at the elementary school, and we kept that at a 0.5. There was a lot of discussion around adding a health teacher at the middle school. I know that was something that was a school committee priority. It was something that was discussed last year. We discussed it again this year. But the principal, Mr. Kalishman, has been working through a pilot program at the middle school, trying to see if there's a way to integrate some health programming with our current staff. And after a lot of discussion, we initially added this in. Mr. Kalishman really felt strongly about seeing this program through for another fiscal year to see if this makes sense. Is this meeting the needs that we're looking to meet as far as offering health at the middle school? And if it's not, then potentially we might be coming back in FY '27 and asking to add that health teacher. But we just felt, he truly felt that at this point, he wanted to see that through. As Max mentioned earlier, there was, a lot of traffic concerns with the new elementary school, and there was a lot to work out in the first year overall, but traffic for sure. I think the team at elementary school has done a fantastic job. They've really worked through those issues in conjunction with Max and others, and they really have a good system, and things are running much better now. And so initially, we had added an additional bus as a courtesy to help mitigate some of those issues. But now we're in a really good place, and we don't really need that extra bus. And we're not in the luxury of being able to provide a bus that isn't mandated. So we are reducing by one bus at the elementary school and going back to what the district has always done, which is provide transportation for mandated students. There was a request to add, we have a 0.5 career counselor here at the high school as part of the Innovative Pathways, as well as they have a lot of consumables within that program. As the superintendent Angelakis mentioned, this is a key area and something that we do want to focus on. However, we did receive confirmation from the state that we will get the same Innovative Pathways grant next year, provided the state budget holds true, which they feel fairly confident in. And so instead of moving that into the budget this year, we're going to again fund that through the grant. And then there was a few assumptions that were made with this budget as well. We have some student device replacements that we have to replace next year. We did put in a capital request to fund that, and so we're assuming that will be funded through capital. I'm sure some of you know this. I don't know if everybody knows this, but last year there's a lot of discussion around the increased cost at the elementary school for utilities and functioning. And so because it was something that was difficult to manage within our budget, and knowing that eventually solar, rooftop, hopefully canopy, would be coming online, and these utility costs would be significantly reduced, the town funded, it sits in our budget as a reserve fund, but they funded through free cash $200,000 to offset our utilities at the elementary school. Because we don't have solar up and running at this point, this budget does assume that that same process will happen this year. And then 2 years ago, in FY '24, we were hit with a 14%, it's called an operational services division rate increase to our out-of-district tuitions, which was just causing a lot of budget issues. So the town created a special education reserve fund, put money in that reserve fund. We reduced our budget. Last year, same thing. We reduced our out-of-district tuitions. Some of that money went into the special education reserve fund. So this budget assumes that practice will happen again this year.
Cheryl, I mean, I think looking at these, it shows how deep we dig when we're looking for efficiencies and we're trying to be creative and not just put everything in the budget, even when we think we might need them. But I'm wondering, so we're at, what, 4.7? Do we know what other districts are asking for, what they're requesting for their budgets? I mean, we know this isn't just a Swampscott issue, right?
Yeah, so in fact, my listserv has sent out a kind of survey trying to understand what other districts are asking for. And so through that, the districts that have reported the average increase is 5.19% for FY26 for other districts across Massachusetts. And I think it was just last week, the Saugus School Committee approved their budget at a 7.4% increase, which is $2.5 million. So to your point, this isn't something that just Swampscott is having to deal with.
Thank you.
Superintendent, I know that you've really dug into this, and I appreciate all that you are making work. One of the concerns that I have is the multi-tiered systems of support. And, you know, Martha and I, we've talked a little bit about this. I mean, we've all been talking about this. It concerns me when those things that we are choosing not to fund, like therapists or the math tutors, those are really all what fit that goal.
Well, I will say this, and I've said it at the tri-chair meetings. One of the things about education is I can sit here and say to you today, we don't need that high school psychologist. And come September, we might need it. And we're going to put the kids first, and we're going to do what we need to do. But in terms specifically of the multi-tiered systems of support, we're not throwing bodies at it anymore. We're looking at it differently. There are some internal things going on and decisions that need to be made, hard decisions, in order to give it a try to make that MTSS system work better at both the middle and high school. And those conversations are upcoming, but we're not throwing bodies at it right now. We're going to work within what we have, and we have one more kind of lever to push to see if we can strengthen this program without throwing bodies at it. But I did say at tri-chair, you know, the thing about education is if something happens and kids come in and we need it and we don't have the capacity because caseloads are too high, then we're going to provide it for our kids. But one of the things that Martha and her team and our team is really good at is analyzing those caseloads. I mean, the day I walked into this role, Suzanne was pushing data, 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 data. And I think we finally have that data, you know, driven decision-making down pat.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, you know, as I looked through and see the goals for each of the 3 building leaders, they all hit that. And I just want to make sure that the school committee is not hamstringing their goals.
Not right now, but I will say I had written the district goals, and then the building leaders wrote their goals. So when I read through them, I thought, wow, we are exactly on track. It was a proud moment for me, like, we're exactly where we should be. So, yeah, we're all on the same page, but, you know, we've come to you and said we've had to make decisions.
I think, like in the back of my mind, I hear Craig Harris here 2 years ago talking about preventative spending on things like social emotional welfare and how much cheaper that is than responsive spending or reactive spending. So
I think it's a good time to shout out how closely I'm working with the health department on the general government side and bringing those programs in. We actually just scheduled another meeting for next week. We've been meeting very frequently about using the funds to benefit the kids in the absence of our mindfulness class that was taken away and other things. So I do need to shout out to Nia and Jeff. They've been, we've had several meetings and we're working together really closely to use those town funds to benefit the kids at the school in this area, so.
Just before you continue, just to let everybody know, really, my colleagues on the other two boards, I just want to go back to the health teacher at the middle school. And when Ms. Stella says there was a long debate, there was a very long debate. When you sit up here as a school committee member, you have to put your full faith and service of the people who are doing the job. They're in there every day. They have the degrees, they have the knowledge, and they have the skill. So as much as we all, it was fairly unanimous, wanted that instructor. After hearing from the superintendent, after hearing from Mr. Kalishman, we grudgingly, I think, agreed to give it one more year. But as the superintendent said, September 5th, that could change. And that's really how we do these debates. We always have to put the kids first with the knowledge that if something happens, we have to fix it. So, thank you. Good. It's all yours.
And so the school committee votes the school budget by cost center, and so we always have to show our budget and how it relates by cost center, because that is how they vote the budget. And the big caveat that I want to point out here is that we are in the middle of negotiations for our teachers, ESPs, and tutors. And because we're in the middle of the negotiations, their salaries sit in our administration cost center, which typically they would be spread out amongst all the cost centers. And so when you're looking at the dollar change and the percent increases outside of facilities, they are very skewed and don't really tell a true picture. But we do have to present this and show this, because that is the way that the school committee votes the budget. It's not only just those 3 units, which make up probably close to 90% of our staff. The other thing that sits in there every year are unanticipated lane changes, because we do have unanticipated lane changes that occur, as well as all of our non-CBA employee raises also sit within that cost center, because there are no guaranteed increases for anyone that is a non-CBA employee.
Ms. Selleck, I should just interrupt one second. Can you just explain, just in case folks don't know, what an unanticipated lane change is, and then probably start from, if you could spend 30 seconds, what a lane change is?
Can I just chime into what you were saying a minute ago, because I think that's important, and I want to emphasize that the non-union personnel's contracts do not say in FY26, this is your salary, and FY27, that's your salary, and if they're not articulated in those contracts, they're negotiated annually, and I just wanted to make that a bit clearer.
So lane change is when a teacher gets credits, course credits, they take classes, and once they get so many credits, 15, 30, 45, so on, they move into the next lane. And so there's, compensation increases when you move, and you get continual education as you move through those lanes. And so right now, some of those lane changes, we don't get notified for the potential of them until February, which obviously is long after we've created the budget. So every year I go through, look at the ones that came through after, and just try to analyze it and create what I think might be the lane changes that end up occurring that we don't know about. So that's just kind of what the explanation is for unanticipated lane changes. The facilities cost center looks like it's decreasing, but again, that's really because we assume $200,000 will not be sitting in this budget and will be funded elsewhere. So that's the vast majority of that decrease. The expenses at Clark have been budgeted a bit lower because from our understanding, there'll be some town departments utilizing Clark. And then Max was able to negotiate a much more favorable cleaning contract for the district. And so we're seeing some cost savings there. And then lastly, Special education cost center, similar. We're assuming $400,000 of our tuition is going to be funded through the Special Education Reserve Fund. And then this year, the operational services division rate, again, which is the rate that they set that the out-of-district tuitions can increase, did come in a bit more in line with previous fiscal years at a 3.67% increase.
Hey, Cheryl, can I ask special education is near and dear to my heart. Do we have any historical average rate for out-of-district tuitions the last couple of years where you see it's going? We had the anomaly of the 14%.
Right.
Where do you think it's going to go in the next several years and kind of where we're at compared to others?
So, to your point, FY24 was the 14% increase, which was just astronomical. And unfortunate because that 14% is now built into the budget. We just keep going up from there. Last year it was like 4.7, I want to say. This year it's 3.67. What's interesting is I actually did look back because I was curious about this myself, having not been in school finance my whole career. When I look back to FY11 and averaged the rate, the average was 2.88%. Since FY24, the average has been 7.45%. So to your question,
The average.
increased to, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to your point, Glenn, it looks like it's starting to tick back down,
Right.
but I don't think we'll see the low levels that we were seeing in FY11, 12, 13, which was more like mid, like 1 point something.
Right. And I just know from me at that time with a child out of district, the out of district schools were always saying, we don't have the cash. We can't touch infrastructure. We can't do programs. So that's why I'm always so curious about all this. And I remember when we talked about the 14%, we literally sat here and what do we do about this?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So while we've been talking about the town appropriation to the budget, there are many other sources that also fund our school budget. There are costs, obviously, that sit inside the town budget that for health insurance, pension, et cetera. While I don't have those numbers to incorporate in this slide, the town appropriation, like I mentioned before, is $33.9 million. We have capital articles that we've requested for technology in the amount of $515,000. Our Nahant revolving fund supports $1.8 million of our budget. Like I discussed earlier, we have revolving funds where we offset costs to the amount of $582,000. And then we do receive grants which help fund positions and expenses for the school, and that's $831,000. $200,000 for the utilities, the $400,000 from the Special Education Reserve, and then the use of $2.1 million of circuit breaker means our total budget, including all sources, is $40,423,563. I do want to talk a little bit about the reserve fund. We do participate in the Medicaid program. Those receipts do go directly into that reserve fund. I think, we're still in our infancy of that, but I do anticipate about $70,000 plus a year in Medicaid reimbursements coming into that. Our current balance, when I was looking at it, looks to be, we just received a Medicaid payment today. Actually, it's like $28,000. So including that, the Special Education Reserve balance is $471,000. And just for everyone's information, the Special Education Reserve Fund can only has a limit on how much money can go into that. And it's 2% of our net school spending, and that's set by DESE. So the maximum that we could have in that reserve fund would be $712,000. As I mentioned before, we do have a lot of outside funding that we use to support our budget. We have our revolving fund.
Can I interrupt for a quick second?
Oh, sure.
Back to that circuit breaker, and spending that down so that there's a balance of $450,000. You know, this, is now a decent time, or should we wait to sort of talk about philosophically, what does that do for our budget?
You can wait if you so desire, but
Yeah.
whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, we can wait.
Okay.
So we have 5.8 million between grants, town capital, circuit breaker, and revolving funds that help support our budget. As you can see, we'll be charging off more expenditures to the athletic revolving funds. Actually, I forgot to mention when we were talking about fees, our pre-K tuition as well went up slightly last year. That was another area we raised the fees in. So again, this all helps to support, or help soften how much we're asking from the town appropriation. And as you can see, that it has grown over FY '25. I do want to point out in FY '23 and FY '24, you see grants of much higher amounts than we have today, and that is the ESSER funds, which we no longer have. They're fully expended, and we don't have them to help offset our budget anymore.
Just a question on the grants. So is the amount that you're anticipating fiscal year '26, is that in line with what it was historically?
The 831.
Yes.
Thereabouts. I do want to caveat that. I will say that this comes later. A few days ago, after all this was set, we did receive a notification from DESE that our Title I funding, which, as you can see, supports a number of math interventionists, is being cut by $105,000. So that is actually not reflected in that 831. So I say it is, but it isn't. It is, but now we just found out about our Title I funding being cut.
And is that because they're cutting Title I funding, or is that because they don't deem us to have the need?
It's the student population.
Okay, so they don't deem us to have the need.
And the problem is we're like right on the cusp too, as well. There's some districts that clearly, they have us in red, yellow. We're in yellow, not in red. So I am hoping that perhaps that will change. Like I said, we just received that notification. There's, I think, 60 or other districts that also have significant reductions to their title funding. So I'm hoping that potentially might change over the coming months. But as of right now, they're telling us they'll be cut by 100.
So it could possibly change based on what happens in the government, in our state government with the budget. Yeah? No?
Yeah, or they look at us and see that we're on the cusp and decide that we don't deserve to have that that level of reduction to Title I.
Is that something that we can plead to our?
Well, I don't imagine we're the only one on a cusp.
Yeah.
And I need to reach out to my colleagues. As Cheryl said, this just happened a few days ago. And if we're noisy enough, I'm hopeful that.
I can just add that on the MS Association of School Committees group that I am on, there were, of my little group, there were 8 other towns that were in our challenge, some far significantly more than $105,000. And the MASC was very clear that they are going to reach out to state government and find out the hows, the whys, and how to make it a little bit more equitable, because all of those towns and representatives I spoke to are like us. Yellow-ish, 1 or 2 students can push us in one direction, and there's a lot of play coming from that. But they're in the same boat. They're making the same presentation that you're making now, that kind of, just in case, we're down X dollars.
Do we know in Jenny Armini's district how many towns are facing this?
I do not.
And MASS and MASC, the Association for Superintendents, work so closely together to advocate for what we need. So I'm sure they're going to be double teaming.
Okay.
So I'll pay attention.
I was told that.
Okay, good.
So this just highlights some of the positions that we do fund outside of the appropriation. 27.3 FTEs we fund through a mixture of the preschool revolving, the Hunt revolving, and the title funds. This slide just gives everyone an overview of our circuit breaker funds, where we've been and where we are today. As you can see in FY23, the light blue bar is the balance that we had going into that fiscal year. As we talked about, FY24 was a very difficult year, and that's when we instituted the Special Education Reserve Fund, which did require the school district to reduce their circuit breaker balance down to $450 if we wanted to access that reserve fund. And so you can see that not only did we use some of our circuit breaker balance, but we actually ended up utilizing $109,317 of the Special Education Reserve Fund in FY24 for our out-of-district tuitions. So now year over year, pretty much what we bring in circuit breaker revenue is what we're going to spend.
So in the past, for a few years, we were running with our circuit breaker at 100%. So whatever money we came in, we held for the following year. Whereas now, we are spending down before accessing that fund.
Mm-hmm.
What would this do to our budget if that were fully funded? Would we be asking for less?
Yes.
Do you know by how much? Maybe calculate for the next time?
You would probably be able to meet the financial guideline. In fact, I know you would.
I do want to just remind the committee that when that agreement for the Special Education Stabilization Fund was developed, it was developed in mind that we were going to revisit it annually, and that just hasn't happened. So, with everything going on, we haven't sat back down and talked about it. And so we could, and I would think that that would be something that would continue to be revisited.
I mean, like when we think about the money coming in, for example, from National Grid, I know that we can't take that and put it into our circuit breaker because that can only come from the government. But it seems to me that if there were like a reset where for a year we didn't have to go into that, then that the following year we would be balanced out. So, it doesn't surprise me as I look at this and our circuit breaker funding, where we have gone well over our ask. Happened to be those years when our circuit breaker has run down pretty significantly. Now, I will say there's probably, but I don't know if that's the causality, because there were also things like the ESSER grants that carried us. But I'd like to kind of see.
So what I will say, though, is that if hypothetically, and we didn't even have it available to us, but hypothetically, if we had had the full balance that we could have carried forward going into FY24, the town would not have created a Special Education Reserve Fund, right? And so we would have had to pay for the 109 and still keep chipping away at our circuit breaker balance to offset that 14% increase. So what I'm saying is let's just say we carried the full amount from 23 into 24. Say we had it and we could carry it all the way into 24. That 14% tuition increase would have significantly depleted our circuit breaker balance going into 25. And so I did actually model this out. And if that hypothetical did occur, you could have probably stayed within the guideline for 24, for 25, for 26, you probably would have been about 3.1%. And then in FY27, we'd be coming right back asking for a similar budget increase because we would have depleted it. So it's,
So a cliff was gonna come because of that
Eventually.
rate increase.
it
was
doesn't matter what
unavoidable.
source
Right.
we're
It just,
using.
it feels, and I know that we're not gonna litigate this here, but it feels disingenuous to be putting money into a reserve fund, which is theoretically a reserve, as opposed to putting it into a reserve fund where you know you're gonna spend it.
Exactly.
I agree.
I just want to maybe stop proceedings. Do anyone out there, do you need just a definition of what a circuit breaker actually is?
I was just gonna ask.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of people in here who are not
I
following.
don't know.
I'm actually gonna turn that over to
me.
Martha, would you mind?
Sure.
Could you just introduce yourself if you don't
So
mind?
I'm Martha Raymond, the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services. So each year, we file a report to the state and document all the tuitions that were paid out during the current fiscal year. And the town, the state, the town owns the first, right, this year, the.
Special education tuitions.
Yes, this is all out-of-district tuitions. The threshold this year, I think, is 52,000. The first 52,000 we spend on any student in any out-of-district placement, we own 100% of that. Anything we spend over that, usually we get about 70% back on anything you spend over the 51,000, but it's in arrears. So it's not the year that we spent it, it comes back the year after. And the idea that why did they do this? I mean, first of all, obviously the cost is very, very high and can range, from $55,000 to a $400,000 placement. That is pretty close to what the range is.
I just want people to understand that, again, we're in the business of, we have to teach every student if they're a special education student, from age 3 to age 22. So that range can be, as Martha said, just want to make sure everyone understands, $50K up to $400,000.
Per year.
Per year for a specific student.
Correct.
Go ahead, Martha.
The reason the best financial practice was to keep 1 year in arrears always at the school departments in our control is because a cost of if one student moves into the district or during that school year, and let's say 2 do, and they're both at a cost of over $400,000, that we are not going back to another board to ask for that money or back to a town meeting to do that, because I was really violating the privacy of that family, and it's to protect people and to also never pit special education, which is a mandated cost. We are going to do it as a federal law and state law against general ed, our general ed expenditures, which are as important as well. Obviously, we are in teaching and learning and education, but that is why. If anybody, that's the reason you do it. So right now, we're not doing that. We're keeping a smaller amount, which theoretically, that smaller amount could be cleared by one student. And then you'd have to go back and ask.
And this is the only kind of money that we can actually hold on to for a year, as opposed to other money.
Some revolving funds you can hold, but this money, yes, you do have to spend it, though, that next year.
And only on special
Yes.
education.
Yes.
And it's called circuit breaker, why?
Because, I think because you hit I don't know the exact why they named it that, but really I think it's because
It's an ironic term.
You hit the threshold and then,
It triggers.
and you get the money.
Triggers the circuit.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
It's a little misleading, we got it.
Because the government named it.
Yes. But it was really to protect a school district from those really high cost out-of-district placements.
Great.
So
Thank
that
you.
we were not laying off first grade teachers to pay for that cost.
Satisfy that.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
That is not what anybody wants to do.
Thank you, Martha.
You're welcome.
So this next slide details out our total compensation for all of our staff historically from FY #23 to FY '26. As you can see, FY '24 and '25 had very modest compensation increases to our budget, and that was purely because of the reductions that we made to our staffing. And in FY '26, while we're only adding a 0.2 FTE over FY '25, our total compensation is increasing 5.7%. And what I will say is that 74% of that compensation is teachers. And as we talked about before, It's not that they're getting a 5.7% COLA. I don't want anyone to think anyone is getting that. It's purely because of the way teacher salary grids work in Massachusetts. And it's across every district. It's not unique to Swampscott. Teacher grids have the lanes and steps. And so, as I mentioned before, you gain a lane when you get so many course credits. And then for every year you're in the district, you move up a step until you're at the top step. And then you have a COLA. So some of our teachers just get COLAs. Some of our teachers just get a step in a COLA. And some of our teachers in any given budget could get a lane change, a step, and a COLA. So that's why it's a 5.7% increase, because you have some that are just getting a COLA and some in those other mixes as well too.
But also significantly more because there's not anybody being laid off as there have been in the past few years.
Correct, and so this is truly more so indicative of what our compensation looks like in a school department year over year.
So high fives would be a normal increase.
Do you want to call in?
Right.
He has a question. Eric.
Yeah, I'm sorry, who, yeah, go, I'm sorry.
So at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that you have some amounts put away in the salary reserve in the administrative cost center.
We would just pass him the.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So in the beginning, you said you have money in the salary reserve in the administrative cost center. Is this 5.7 increase inclusive of that, or?
This is every single compensation line that we have in our appropriate budget, so it's inclusive of that, stipends, anything we pay anybody as it relates to compensation is part of this.
And then the steps and lanes, is that essentially a proxy for, merit? If you have certificates.
Well, not merit a step has nothing to do with merit, it's just purely years of service in the district. A lane, it's not merit, it's educational. Whether you have received additional course credits that and there's a whole process, but it's additional education that they've received.
And then the district uses that additional education in placing students. So if there's, do you look at what credits and what degrees a teacher has in assigning them classrooms or teachers?
No, because we have all highly qualified staff. Everybody's highly qualified. But for example, I left the classroom in 2005, but I went for 2 master's degrees to move over on that wage table. So I had a master's in computers and communications, and I had a master's in educational leadership. So those enhanced my skills, but we don't look at a certain master's degree and say, okay, you can teach a physics class. They have to have those credentials in order to teach those. So it has nothing to do with merit. It's just about advancing their educational degrees.
But let's say you have like a reading specialist
Mm-hmm.
specialization. Would you then get more students that need help reading versus if you specialize more and get more certificates in math, and then you might have more kids that need math help? I mean, I don't know how it works.
Well, they usually, so they would get a license as a reading specialist, and those reading specialists would be the teacher that would be teaching, say, the interventionist would be a reading interventionist. But for a general education teacher, say at the elementary level, they all are highly qualified. So those specific credits that they continue to get don't necessarily translate into where the students are placed in their classrooms.
Can you just maybe explain a little bit more what the words highly qualified?
Highly qualified is, I don't know, Lisa, you want to take
Masters.
it? Yeah, they
Yeah, masters.
Masters.
Licensed in the subject you're
Yeah.
teaching.
And it's almost like they have their specialty in what they need in order to teach the students that are in front of them.
But, so I think, if I hear what you're asking, if I went back to school and got a master's in math, would I then become the math specialist? And the answer to that is only if I decided that that's what the career, the path that I wanted to go in. You might very well just stay in the classroom where you are, and you're bringing that expertise to all of your kids, to all of your peers, you know, as you do professional development, but not necessarily in education. Am I on the right path? In education, just because you have that degree doesn't mean that you're then sort of plucked out and moved in to be a specialist, because that's its own career path.
Whatever courses they take to move on the wage table have to relate to their field of practice. I guess that's the best general way to say that.
General education, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so you do.
You can't take archery if you're a math teacher, right?
Yeah, so the district does get something more from the students?
Yes.
From the teachers that.
Yes.
Yes.
More skills, more education, more specialty. You know, there's differentiated instruction. There's all kinds of things that they take that relate to their instructional practice within the classroom generally.
And then earlier you mentioned you have a data-driven approach.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a difference in the data between different teachers that have different certifications?
We haven't gone that far to really analyze it. We do see a difference in utilizing the data. The iReady has been really helpful in a lot of our placements and services that we're providing kids, but we haven't dug that deep.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Great questions. Go, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Of course.
Okay, so does the 5.7% increase take into account any differences in the contract that may be signed when the contract is up for renewal / renegotiation?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
We hope.
So one thing that I always like to highlight, because again, it relates to our budget increase, and in the previous slide, you know, 81% of the school's budget is compensation, and 19% of that is expenses, which is fairly typical for a school district. We're in the business of people and students, and so the vast majority of our budget resources goes towards the people that we have here in this district. I'm going to go through, throughout this presentation, some DESE data. I think a lot of people often like to look at this information. There's a couple caveats I do want to say. The peer groups that are utilized throughout this presentation were the original ones that we had during bargaining. We have just recently met with our bargaining team, and there are a few adjustments, not wholesale adjustments, but there are a few communities that have changed. So I just do want to caveat that, as well as this is directly from the DESE website. Anyone can obtain this information themselves. The most recent information we do have is 2023 from DESE. We probably won't receive the 2024 information until July. And so one of the metrics that we look at is average teacher pay in our district as compared to our comparables. And as you can see, Swampscott is just right kind of in line with the average overall.
Can I just emphasize what you said, because I think it's important. This is 2023, so Marblehead's newly negotiated contract figures are not in here.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that has just settled a contract recently that's been in the news, they're not on this list because the DESE data gets posted at a later date. I just want to really emphasize that.
And actually, then there are several districts on here, just
That have
from some of the
settled.
information that have come our way that have settled.
Yes,
contracts.
so this is old, but this is available on DESE. This is what's available.
But if we know what they are, if we know what those numbers are, why not use those to reflect what the average should be?
Well, we don't know all of them.
Right, we don't know all of them, that's the thing. So these were the districts that we used in our last bargaining session in 2022.
Yeah.
And so that's the most recent data on DESE. And so to put, say, Marbleheads in there, but not the other ones in there, would kind of skew what we're looking at.
I would offer that 1 data is spurious, 2 to 3 data offers a trend, if we know 3 data points, we should perhaps add them in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good feedback.
I feel obliged to say, Tara, that that 5.7 estimate is our best guess
Yes.
based on our history, based on data. But I think if you look at any town around us, you'll see pretty quickly that there are lots of towns that came into negotiations with numbers that were wildly outside of what the budgets were. And they all belong to the same union. I think that's important to remember. And part of the, I don't want to get too far off topic, but, you know, with an excess levy capacity like we have of $8 million, we are, that is the #1 tool that is being discussed throughout Massachusetts for raises and compensation.
Doug, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just, I want to clarify here, because I think I've just heard 2 different things. The 5.7 is not, there's many things incorporated in that 5.7%, right? There's lanes and steps and raises and everything else, right?
Correct.
So just to be clear for everyone listening, that's
Yes.
not one thing or the other. It's
No.
a whole bunch of things inside.
Correct, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
And a whole bunch of non-CBA employees as well.
Excuse me?
And it's not just employees governed by CBAs, it has all our employees.
Non-union as well.
Non-unions, crossing guards, security monitors. I just want to step back to your comment really quickly. The reason why we can't reproduce this same average teacher pay, while we may be able to pull contracts for communities that have their grids, we have no idea where all those teachers fall on those grids. And that's why DESE calculates this information based off reports that myself and my counterparts file with them. They culminate all of the information and they produce this, but we don't have access to how districts are paying all of their employees. So we can look at a salary grid and see where, you know, I'm going to just say a bachelor's step 1 is. But what we don't have is by district how, I'm just going to say Ipswich, where all their teachers are on their salary grid.
So if they have a particularly young staff, it could be skewed in one direction. Or
Right.
particularly older staff, or some, not older, but somebody who's been in the district a longer time, it's going to skew higher.
So this next graph depicts the staffing here at Swampscott Public Schools and compares FY20 through our budget FY26. Since FY20, we have reduced our FTEs by 29.6. As you can see, there was a significant uptick in 22, 23. Again, COVID, ESSER funds, and as those funds have dropped off, and as I mentioned earlier in the compensation graphs, you can see how our FTEs and the reduction in FTEs helped to soften our compensation increases from 23 to 25, and now that we're in a steady state, that's why we're seeing that 5% increase. This next graph shows our enrollment in and out of district. In 2020 and through the pandemic, you can see that our enrollment was decreasing. The great news is for the last couple of years, our enrollment has started to tick up ever so slightly, which is really good for the district. And hopefully we'll continue to see that trend.
Can I just, Superintendent, can you just talk a little bit about our trends for total enrollment and children who are coming back from an out-of-district placement, a private placement, and how that's gone since we've kind of come out of the pandemic?
I would say middle school sees a lot of kids returning from the charter school. We've seen a lot of kids come back from the charter school, private schools, St. Mary's, St. John's, the prep. So, yeah, we've had a steady stream of kids returning, not to mention kids moving into the district. Lori will tell you that during the winter break, we had 5 new elementary students enroll at Swampscott Elementary School. So I do think they're spread out. I do anticipate, remember that building was built for 900 students, we're at 737, I think, right now? 737 right now. So I do anticipate that continuing to tick up. I'm proud of the fact that we're trending upward, because there was a time where, and certainly during the pandemic, we lost a lot because we were closing.
Right.
We were told we could have 11 kids in a class, 11 bodies in a classroom with the teachers, whereas some of the private schools were staying open and people were leaving us and jumping ship, and every family circumstance is different. So it's nice to see students coming back and students enrolling. So, yeah, I'm pleased with that.
Thank you.
I just have a quick follow-up on what in and out of district means. So like how many kids are being educated in Swampscott schools of this 21, 29?
How many people are we paying for? Because some of the out-of-district are special ed, so they're physically in a different spot, but we're paying for it, as opposed to a kid who goes to St. John's that we're not paying for.
Right, so the 2129 is what we're paying for, whether they're in an out-of-district placement or we're educating them within the district.
Okay.
Yes, so they're all.
We have 2,141 students currently today.
So it's even gone up right.
In district.
In district.
Are we sure?
In district.
So that
includes students who are out of district that are those are also our students. They just may not be physically here, but but they are our students.
Right.
It does not include students who are private school, homeschooled, or in charter.
Right.
So this 2129 is dated. It is actually 20.
It's the October 1 number.
Okay.
So from October 1, we've gone from 2129 to 2143. And for Tara, your question, we call them out of district, but they're still our kids, so they're within this total. They're just not physically here.
Got it. No, it just becomes more relevant in the next slide where you're showing the FTEs going down and the enrollment going up. And I just want to be able to understand
I appreciate
who the
the question.
FTEs are,
Yes, of course.
teaching.
Yep.
Thank you for leading me into the next slide, which really just takes our enrollment and then plots our FTE in the green line. So you can see the enrollment dipping down, and our FTEs at that point were quite above our enrollment graphs as you map them together. And then you see the steep decline in our FTEs as our enrollment is increasing.
I just want to emphasize in 22 and 23, again, we were using ESSER funds for positions that were needed during the pandemic, knowing full well that we would have to reduce them. So I don't, want to think we were just, the enrollment was down. There were definite needs, particularly in the mental health arena, that we were trying to fill with those additional FTEs.
So one question and one comment, I guess, on this slide. A question is, the enrollment data is as of October 1st. Is the FTE data as of the same cutoff date?
Yes.
And then so has that changed, or is that that doesn't change as much as enrollment, right?
Well, at any given day, our FTEs can go up and down, to be quite frank with you. So it is consistently changing, but typically overall, we wouldn't see large swings in our FTEs from October to the end of the school year. But it certainly can change. I mean, it's because it's based off student needs. So, if we have a new IEP and that IEP calls for one-to-one to sport, then that's going to change our FTE count. And so FTEs do become quite hard to predict, but we're still, again, budgeting for next year at just a 0.2 above. So we do try to manage them as best as possible.
Pam, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay, great.
Eric, did you have another question?
Yeah, and then I guess the comment is just that the decline in FTEs just looks so steep in this chart because you have different scales on each side, right?
Right.
And if you had the same scale, it would be flatter, right? If you just used, you know, like the scale for the.
Well, you wouldn't be able to see the line if I used the same scale.
Right, but what like the bottom, the lowest FTE count is towards the bottom of the axis, right? But the lowest part of the enrollment is not towards the bottom, so it's like less stretched.
You think this is too dramatic?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm proud of the fact we went from 389 to 349.2, so point well taken.
Could I just ask a follow-up, just to complete my initial thought about on the previous slide? So where this shows enrollment, and I guess it looks like, I don't know, but somewhere between 2,100 and 2,150, I think, for 2025, is that in district or out of district, or what is the in-district number that the FTEs are teaching to?
There's approximately 35 to 40 students out of district.
Is that included in this bar chart?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So this next slide just walks everyone through kind of the history between our state aid and assessments. I'm really pleased to report that our state aid since FY20 has certainly gone up, as well as our assessments. You can see we're historically going up until FY23, and now since then have started to decline. So overall, we're seeing a general increase in state aid historically, and then a general decrease in the assessments.
Do you want to explain what the assessments are?
Sure. So the assessments are, there's 3 types of assessments. 2 are that come through on the state, from the state, which is choice and charter school assessments that they charge us, which gets netted against the state aid. And then the 3rd assessment is this assessment to Essex North Shore. So those are the kids that we send to Essex North Shore. That's you actually can see that as a line item in the budget when the budget's voted. And that's a direct assessment charged directly to the town.
Could we just for the audience, Essex North Shore is what?
There is a vocational school that our kids can apply to go and attend a vocational school. I think the next slide shows the assessment a little bit better. Yeah.
I also do just want to quickly point out today we did receive the preliminary cherry sheet information for the governor's budget. Now granted, still has many iterations to go through. I think it's typically finalized in May time frame-ish. Last year, our net state aid number actually held all the way through, which was great. Based off the governor's budget, our net state aid is increasing $446,000 for the schools this year, which hopefully will hold through the House, Senate, and Conference Committee. And she's using, it's partly the Student Opportunity Act Trust, which funds the Chapter 70. It's anticipated state revenue. And then they actually have surplus fair share revenues that they're using to fund this increase, which is the millionaire's tax.
It seems like the assessment for Essex is high, based on the number of kids that we've sent there over the last few years, which I know is significantly less than in years past. I also know that they raised their fees pretty significantly.
I can tell you in FY23, we had 29 students attending Essex North Shore. In FY24, we had 23, and in FY25, we had 20. So it's decreasing at a steady pace, I guess you would say.
Yeah, so the next slide kind of details out those 3 different assessments: school choice, charter school, Essex North Shore. As you can see, actually, Essex North Shore has been decreasing since FY '23. Overall, school choice has increased a little bit, and then the charter school assessment has also decreased as well, which kind of goes to that point of some of the kids coming back.
Can I ask Amy if you know how much the Essex is charging us per student?
That, I can actually answer
sorry.
that. I spoke to the finance director. The preliminary numbers for the charges won't be coming out until February 13th when they meet. So we won't even know preliminary numbers from them.
But last year to this year?
Oh, last year, I don't know the exact rate.
I'll see if I can find
But to your point, Amy, in FY '22, if you look at the Essex North Shore assessment, we had 36 kids there. And it's less than the FY '23 at 29. So they started to increase their fees, you could say, there.
But also if they do any kind of project, right? If they
No.
build something or fix something, that gets passed to the member districts, right?
I don't know. I mean, I know that there's a school committee member that represents Swampscott, but I don't know who that is, or they're not a part of.
It's not a school committee member, it's a committee member. I mean, a town member.
Yeah, but they're a member of the Essex School Committee.
Oh, yeah.
The Essex Tech School Committee.
Want to keep.
Yeah, we do have a representative on the Essex Tech School Committee.
Who's that?
Oh, I know.
That was Greg McDonald from the
This is
Finance
Greg
Committee.
McDonald, Finance Committee member. I know that because my wife was on the Essex Tech School Committee for about 6 or 8 years.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, that voice in the sky.
Man behind the curtain.
I also want to say that for FY '26, our enrollment, that the Essex North Shore assessment will be based off, went down by 3 students. So I do think that the assessment for '26 could stay fairly consistent, or a very modest
slight dip.
increase, or dip, possibly.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I'd like to say that their enrollment is decreasing because of the programs we're offering within the district. When you can do an after-dark program and do your academics here at Swampscott High School and then get bussed over to Essex North Shore, that's great. But also our innovative pathways, when you could do advanced manufacturing here and get those career and technical educations. I like to believe there's a correlation. Maybe I'm in my Pollyanna little world, but I definitely see, I'm going to go with it. I'm definitely going to go with it.
That's probably true.
So one other metric that we look at that DESE also does put out, which we do have FY '24 information, but it's only based off budget, not actuals, is our net school spending and how we compare to, again, our comparable communities. As you can see in FY '20, Swampscott's net school spending was above the average of our peer communities, and it has now for '24, which is the most recent information, got dipped below the average. And for those of you that might not know what makes up this number, it's 2 things. One is the Chapter 70 aid, and then the required local contribution. So those 2 things make up what is the net school spending, which is the minimum amount of money that must be spent in a school district. And then the local, required local contribution is based off the ability of the community to raise tax revenue, their property values, and then the income values in that specific community as well. The maximum local contribution is 82.5%. That's the max that the state will make a local community contribute to a school budget. In Swampscott, the local contribution is 80%.
80?
80.
So if we look at this having gone from 53 to 36%, and Ipswich going from 52 to 77, what does that tell us? I mean, because it's not, if we're looking at this, especially compared to the next page where we're talking about per pupil spending, it doesn't mean that they're spending more.
It's the percent above what they're required. And so it's all based off, what is that specific community required to contribute? And then how much is that specific community contributing above it?
So are you giving the least amount, or the least expected, or are you spending more on the kids?
It depends on the socioeconomics of that community.
So according to the state, we are underspending?
We're overspending by 36%.
Okay.
So we're above the required percent by 36%.
So we're overspending less than other people.
Right.
Correct.
We don't know what.
Say that again?
We don't know what they're.
Who said, somebody just said something.
Naomi said we're not overspending as much as other districts.
Okay.
Can you look at this chart? Hi, Naomi.
But what Tara said is, but we don't know what their baseline is.
Correct.
Right.
Right, that's,
I mean, I don't love this metric, I never
Yeah, we
really
don't-
did.
But the
I don't
Department
really
of
love
Revenue
it.
does, and they are,
I guess we're trying to find the meaning in this statistic, in this number.
It's, again, it's just one of many numbers that DESI puts out there,
All
right?
different ways of looking at the information.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
right.
Got it.
And so another number that DESI puts out there that often people talk about is per pupil expenditures. And so we compare Swampscott's per pupil expenditures for in and out of district students as compared to the average. Again, we're slightly above the average overall. Per pupil expenditure does take into account all sources of spending. So it's not just the school appropriation, it's not just school revolving funds. What's also factored in here is the school expenditures that sit on the town budget as well too. So it's all, wherever the money is coming from to educate our students.
Naomi, to your point, when I look at this chart, this is more important to
Yeah.
me than the net school spending, because there is so much that goes into that net school spending. Every town is completely different. And even though every town is completely different, looking at this, to me, this is just me talking, this is a little bit more of a matrix that I look at, but that's just me. Go ahead.
so could we go back to this, Swampscott and Ipswich, which both started out at about the same, 53, 52%. We started out at very similar numbers, 17 to 8. We've grown, they've grown a little bit more than us, but not, more than a.
That's why they don't correlate, Amy, like net school spending and per pupil
No.
they don't match in any way,
Well,
shape, or form.
why is DESI providing this then?
I don't know.
Amy, Sarah, you were going to say something?
Oh, I just had a question for Cheryl. This
Oh.
doesn't include capital, or it does include capital?
So there's 3 categories that are not part of the calculation. If we spent money on recreation activities, which we don't as a school district, debt service, and fixed assets, i.e. capital.
So I have a question. So that means if we're moving line items out of the budget, such as computers, et cetera, and we're putting them over into capital, that's not included in this number?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because they wouldn't be able to tease that out. So if we
Well,
had,
because it's a fixed asset, debt service.
yeah, so if we had, $500,000 going into technology through capital improvements, that would not appear on the net school
Right.
spending.
So any of our historical technology or facilities capital requests are not part of a per pupil calculation.
So building a new elementary school didn't help our purpose.
That did not factor into this.
The per pupil would be,
David, we would be the leaders.
Well, I mean, but I asked this because I do remember that a year or two, it must be last year, because it was you, I'd never even heard of net school spending before, that you did bring this to us as an important data point. And so I just want to, I just struggle with it. I struggle to understand, but trust that as the math person.
I think people look at that number as, right or wrong, as how much the community is investing. I think that's how people look at it. I don't know that it really tells you that, but I think that's how people look at it.
David?
Yeah, just quick question. I'm looking at slide 20 as well as slide 13, specifically Linfield. So when you look at Linfield's per pupil expenditure for 23, it's 19,607. But when you're looking at the average teacher pay, their average teacher pay seems to be the highest of all of our comp communities. So how does that, can you help make sense of that for me and for the public?
Not having ever gone through Linfield's budget and not really knowing what they spend their money on. Perhaps, I don't know what their FTEs look like on 13. They have 152 teacher FTEs, we have 187, so I would say that that's how that correlates.
Say that one more time. They have 152?
Yes.
FTEs.
And we have 187, so they have far less teachers than we do. So despite that their pay might be much higher,
But they could have larger class sizes potentially.
perhaps, I don't know what their.
I'd have to look at their enrollment too. I don't know their enrollment off the top of my
I
head.
mean, they're pretty
Okay.
comparable.
Yeah.
We know that.
It just stood out to me as an outlier.
Yeah.
Although that's just teacher cost on 13.
Right,
20 is not just teacher cost. So
No,
they're
it's all cost.
two different numbers.
right.
Right. But if what David was, I think, trying to say is, how come if you teacher pay so much higher in Linfield, but their per pupil is so much less than ours, how does that correlate? If they have 30 less teachers than us, and teachers drive a lot of our per pupil and overall expenditures, that is why you might see that differential.
Or they have other things that are out of the categories that you said are not included in the per pupil.
Could be, yeah.
You know, might be mixing a little bit of apples and oranges.
I mean, 30 less teachers is a fairly significant differential. It would make a significant difference in how much they're spending per student.
Cheryl, for sake of conversation, Jesse has Linfield for FY '23 at 2,195 students, 565 since completing high school.
How many, I'm sorry, what was their enrollment?
2,195 is their FY '23 district enrollment, and then it sub-breaks out that 565 of those students are at the high schools.
I mean, it's worth noting that we recognize that they are a like district, that this is what we agreed to with our teachers in terms of how we compare ourselves. They're really similar in size, they're similar in makeup, you know, for the kind of towns that they are. They're towns, they're not cities. Help me out, what like the other categories that we came together to choose these 10?
I think the bottom line, it's a great question, and that's what makes this so difficult, is that every district is a little different. Every district has a different makeup. Every district has, you know, different philosophies, not only about education, funding, and, you know, when we were talking with the union the last time, again, some of these towns have changed. It's the best of the closest we can possibly be. But there's always going to be districts that we compare ourselves to, but nothing's identically the same. Go ahead, continue.
Okay. Moving on, there's a few slides here that just give a summary of the budget by location. We always historically include this information. This still has the same caveats as the previous slides in that because raises are sitting in a district-wide line, then these budget increases are skewed because the raises are not sitting in the locations with which these individuals work. So I won't really go into the overall increase, because I don't believe that it's a helpful metric to discuss, but I'll just give some highlights as far as what's in the elementary school budget for this year. We did add a special education teacher mid-year, and that teacher is remaining in '26. The current leadership and administration at the elementary school is one principal and 1.5 assistant principals. Next year, this budget is moving to a model of one principal, one assistant principal, and one special education administrator. There were some additional support staff that we did need this year that will remain in '26, provided those student needs continue. We added a building-based sub as well to the elementary school. And then there was a restructuring of the nursing staff, and we now have a lead nurse that's a district-wide employee.
A little bit off topic, how many nurses are at the elementary school? Two. Okay. Eric?
Yeah, hi, a question on the elementary school. Have you seen any, consolidation or efficiencies from bringing the three schools together as compared to, just cost and, two nurses are less than three and things like that?
I mean, I would say that one of the biggest is the consolidation of administration, right? When we had multiple separate elementary schools, there has been some efficiencies with support staff. Maybe not exactly to the extent that we had initially thought. And we did have to add a few throughout this year, but as you can see with our FTEs, we're still kind of staying in line with the reductions that we had budgeted for '25. So it's more so shifting, like we had an ELL teacher at the middle school, and half of that person shifted to the elementary school. So some of it is also just shifting personnel within the district as well, too.
But there are also more kids who are on IEPs than there were a few years ago. So
Yes.
there are more, and I guess the question is, would there be even more if there were three buildings versus one?
I would just say that we have improved programming by bringing everyone together, and equity.
Yeah.
You do remember, like, Stanley Elementary School was at 5% low socioeconomic, and within a half mile of the school that was at 25. Services for Title I go by that school. Now we can have all the services in that one building. So certainly there are students at Stanley who might need reading services, but they were really consolidated at Clark and Hadley. So it brought things together.
Is there anything that suggests that by bringing three facilities together, we're getting synergies? I know that certainly I heard from the energy efficiency side, that's a vast improvement, but be curious to know what it was compared to three sort of aging buildings to a brand new fantastic building at a larger scale.
Yeah, I think, that's a great question, and it actually, I think I spoke to it a little bit in my presentation, that we're not really running the building yet as we will long-term. Like, utility costs are a perfect example. We haven't even got all of our utility bills, like, accurately measured by National Grid at this point. And we also haven't run the building as we will, like, electrically wise, yet, just because of the commissioning status of the building. So that, it's a developing situation. We did a lot of analysis to this question in the planning of the building, and there are efficiencies. Electricity is not inexpensive either, so running a fully electric building is going to be expensive. Also, like, this building has air conditioning, right? None of the other elementary schools had air conditioning. That's a big factor, but that's a big thing to have for our students and staff. This building's well ventilated. The other buildings weren't always as well ventilated, so there's a lot of factors that go into it.
No, I think it's reassuring that there's a path towards that, and then let's just not forget that aging facilities, they become more expensive as well, because preventive maintenance quickly turns to corrective maintenance. So, yeah,
I wasn't looking at the clock, but Amy was. Bye-bye, it's
Yeah,
midterms.
thank you, guys.
Midterm study.
Have a good night.
I usually watch my clock more carefully for you both.
Midterms.
Yes, good
Have a
luck
good
and
night.
good luck
Good
night.
midterms.
Yeah.
I was
Because I'm sure you understood every bit of this.
Yeah. So just to go through some of the highlights at the middle school, we did, this budget does add a 5th grade teacher at the middle school. We are seeing some expenses go down as a result of the cleaning contract as well. I just talked about shifting some of the ELL resources over to the elementary school based off student needs. There was a small reduction in support staff at the middle school. And then we talked about the health teacher not being funded this year, but a potential add for FY27. And then as we roll into the high school, this budget does add a 1.0 math teacher to the high school. It includes an addition of $10,000 in funding for the robotics program, which has really become quite popular but expensive as well too. We are offsetting some of our costs in the high school more with the athletic revolving fund. We talked about the physical education offerings that will be increased at the high school as well. And then, again, our Career Pathways grant will be funding the .5 career counselor as well as their consumables at the high school.
Can I ask a question about that? I saw earlier when we were looking at grants, that the grant for the Innovation Pathways is going by half.
It started out at did it start?
Yeah.
It started out at 125, it's down to, but we're
Down
getting
to-
to 50.
It's
again.
down to 50.
Mhm.
So,
But the fact that we're even getting 50, we're grateful for.
so if we start another innovation pathway, which I think there's been discussion of,
Technology has been,
or the banking, or am I?
well, financial literacy right now and advanced manufacturing. We have been talking about for years bringing in technology, but with the absence of Dr. Bacon and the Director of Teaching and Learning right now, we won't be doing that.
So by going from 150,000 to 50, we're assuming that cost now.
We are assuming some costs in terms of, just some costs in terms of materials.
I mean, I know that there was a huge startup cost for
Right.
like all of those
Right.
machines.
We're not, what I'm afraid of is if that 50,000 goes away, then we're
That
gonna be,
was what I was gonna ask.
that's when we're gonna be supporting that.
Think that that's going away, or?
Because
it
there's
will
so
plan?
much
Mhm.
stuff
Mhm.
that they use to build into.
Oh my gosh, just look at social media and what he's posting and what is being created, I'm just blown away.
So that's so that 50 grand is mostly for materials.
In the .5.
And the career
And the
counselor.
career counselor,
Mhm.
okay.
Mhm.
But the teacher in that class has always been on that was not a subsidized
Was it
role.
the first year? I don't think it was the first year, there was
Yeah,
so much startup costs.
I get scared about these things, it was like kindergarten, that they gave us the startup costs and then that was done.
When it became full day, yeah,
And-
yeah.
I'm going to turn over to Ms. Raymond.
Do you want to hit, I don't have do you want to just go to the next slide? I don't know. Oh, you got it up, okay. So special education major cost drivers. I am fortunate that Cheryl and I work very closely together because our numbers are constantly changing about what the costs are, and we do freeze them at one point. I have to say, this is what the actuals are and what are possible projections. And that continues after the budget is developed and finalized, hence why you have circuit breaker, because it's not a number that's fixed. Our transportation costs are still highly volatile. There's a real shortage of bus drivers across the state. One route for one child, and I have this currently, is $425 a day.
Say that again?
One route, transporting one student, can cost at the high end of $425 a day. So that's something that's across the state.
And
There,
that does not get covered, or does get covered through?
there's some recovery sometimes through McKinney-Vento, which is through foster care and homeless transportation. Sometimes we do recoup them, some funding, but it's not a one-to-one. It's not one-to-one, so, and we incur the cost now, and it's also not a predictable cost.
All right, can we just hold on? Is there any, could we get just a couple more pages to go? Are there any questions out there?
I'm just not understanding the number. I understand there's a range, and this is the way high end, the 425 a day. But is there an example, certainly without names, but how would it cost $425 to transport one student for one day that costs $425?
Yes,
How would that occur?
How would it occur?
So,
gently.
yeah, I know. There are students who could be in and out of district placement, students who could be in a foster care placement, students who are homeless across, and can be upwards of an hour away, and we have to provide transportation. Remember, that's going there and back, and it's going twice. And you think about the time of day, not many people want to work from 6 to 8:30 in the morning, 6 a.m., because that's sometimes how soon you have to get out to get that student back to Swampscott, or in the afternoon traffic. So that is just the running market rate.
I mean, and as you've been pointing out in negotiations, there are no bus drivers.
No. There's days where we don't have one of our large buses shows up because there's not a bus driver.
So when there's no bus drivers.
And that's a societal thing. Like, how much are we valuing people who we put in the care of our children, in? So I think it's something that's a reckoning that's probably going to happen. But oftentimes for transportation, we do get some shared costs. So we do participate in a contract with SEAM Collaborative. And so that's where all different towns on the North Shore collaborate and work together to transport students. So students, say from Salem or Marblehead or Lynn, may go together on a van to a school, and that's very helpful for districts. But we have no idea if or when or how that's happening. The only time I know that I get a cost share is when the invoice shows up. There's no prediction, you have no idea, because we're not allowed to actually know who that other student is in that other town, because these are all confidential information. So it's very unpredictable. What we do is we look at historical costs. I mean, that's all you can really do in special education. So, but one student could change the factor by 50,000 unexpectedly.
Martha,
so that does happen.
For the newer finance committee members, could you just explain the homeless foster care and
Oh, the
how they
law?
stay in Swampscott?
Sure. So if a student is enrolled in Swampscott and becomes homeless, and they may be they may move to a hotel or a shelter that could be 45 minutes to an hour away, we are required, under the homeless law, we are required to transport. We do share that transportation cost with the district where the student is actually currently now residing. But they have a right to come back to our school, and that's to protect that when a child is going through such insecurity, we want to have something that's permanent. So it's in the best interest of the child to stay at least with their home base of school. The same thing can happen with foster care. If a student has a DCF placement, they can be, and that is very difficult. It's very hard for DCF to find places for students who may need a short-term placement to live. And I've had students placed as far away as Haverhill. And that cost is not shared. Foster care is entirely on Swampscott. But again, when a student is facing such a hard issue where they've left their home, we're the one stable factor. The state the guidance is they stay in their home district. So, and that's an unpredictable cost. That can happen tomorrow, and I wouldn't know, and we do it.
Is that choice at all? Are they required to stay in their home district, or can that family say, if we're in Haverhill?
You do have, the student has a right to enroll in the town that they are actually living in, or stay in the school district that they were last enrolled in.
Okay.
And I will say, most often, unless we're in, I think I've had a student placed like in Framingham before, sometimes it becomes prohibitive, right? I mean, you don't want a child on a van for an hour and a half.
And do we hold any responsibility if they are in our district, they go into foster care, they go to Haverhill. Does that, and they choose to go to Haverhill, does Haverhill pick up those costs, or do anything still bear on us?
If the student enrolled and they were a student who could be in an in-district program, then they would stay. If a student actually moves before April 1 and they were in a out-of-district placement, we actually incur that cost for that school year. If it's after April 1, we include it for that school year and the next school year, and that helps predictability for a district. So if a student moves into Swampscott after April 1, let's say in a residential placement that costs $400,000, that town has to still incur that cost that same year. So there's a lot of things that are unpredictable. Okay. That is why, for special ed especially, circuit breaker. Right.
So just back to Naomi, to your initial question.
Yes.
That can happen. It does happen.
Yep.
I got it.
So Martha, aside from the cost, separating the cost, you have more of a really, this is a dynamic challenge, it sounds like. And is there any suggestions you would like to find other ways to help support that? Because it sounds like it's a day-to-day challenge and it's probably tearing your hair out to try to support these kids.
I want to shout out to Martha that she keeps a very detailed, and forgive me if you already said it, very detailed spreadsheet on predicting the out-of-district placements. And she is more often than not dead on. So she keeps a running spreadsheet of what is the percentage of likelihood that this student is going to go out of district, and she manages that budget so tightly and is typically very spot on. So as unpredictable as it is, I've watched Martha over the last 11 years tighten it up as best we could. Beyond that, I don't know what we do.
I think the only part you don't know is if someone moves here.
Right.
Like, that I have zero control of. But I do, obviously, we have a very good handle on the students that are in district who I think are at risk. And that's why we're investing in programs.
Right. But so if we had the reserve fund that was fully funded to that
12,000.
And then we were allowed to keep our circuit breaker higher, maybe double what it is now, that would give us a lot of certainty, right? That would give stability to that system.
But
I don't know how to do that, but if there's money out there from National Grid or here or there, maybe there's a way to do that.
You just never want to, we're going to be spending the money. That's the law.
Somewhere, right.
We would never want to, like I said, say, oh, we're not going to be offering physics at the high school. Like that's why that money is set. It's not to pull away from other children, but it's required. That's why you have circuit breaker.
But is it really more just, what I heard originally was having a consistent transportation system that's adaptable to a dynamic problem? I realize there's money associated with it. We're gonna spend it regardless. Is it more reassuring to have a dependable and flexible transportation system when it changes so that you are not having to jump through a spreadsheet?
So do we build our own?
I'm just saying, how do we achieve that?
You couldn't, build, there's so many things that go into transportation. You have to have dispatch that would be working from 8 to 6. They have GPSs on all the vans. The driver calls out sick. So we have we contract with it. We're too tiny. There are some school districts that do have it, but they're huge. We don't, and even the big ones have to contract out too for transportation because there's just not, they're not capable. I mean, it's more of, we have a company, I go there first. If I can't find it there, I go and we put out for bids to other companies, but it's a supply-demand issue. We have to do it. And if you get a really student who's very far away, it can be upwards of that. And really it's, we're not paying, it's not a job that people want.
Everybody, it sounds like, is having this in the surrounding districts, and
Sure.
maybe a solution is we just get into a stronger consortia amongst everybody.
We do. Already do it.
We already
We're a
are
member
in
of
one.
collaborative.
There's another collaborative, another consortium, the North Shore Education Consortium, is talking about regionalizing transportation. So there's already one collaborative that does that, and there's another one.
And we're lucky. We belong to it. Actually,
Yeah.
other districts on the North Shore don't.
Yes.
So that is actually a real high cost savings
They're
for
working
us.
on that now. We've been working on it. I'm on the board, probably been working on it for the last years.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean,
yeah.
volume for a transportation company that's the name of the game for their profits and more flexibility.
Yep.
Yep. So we're lucky that we actually are one of the districts on North Shore that does belong to a collaborative. There's an application shortage for special education positions, which really means at times we have to hire very experienced staff. It'll be a higher cost. We really have to invest in professional development for our newer staff. It's critical for our students. Special education, but also general education. There's been a lot of research in education in the field, how the brain works, and how we provide instruction. What does specialized instruction look like? How do we assess? Our assessment tools have become so sensitive to be able to pick up dyslexia even with just one subtest. That requires an investment in testing, an investment in curriculum, and an investment in professional development. So our students with disabilities, up until the pandemic, we actually were trending a little below the state in how many students had been identified, around 19%. We are over the state now, and that's a couple of reasons. There aren't more students with disabilities living in Swampscott versus other towns, but we are small, and we have students who definitely were impacted by COVID in terms of COVID learning loss, and it also in mental health. We were able to utilize the ESSER funds, which I actually am very proud of. There were some districts who actually did not figure out ways to spend their ESSER funds, but we spent them. We immediately deployed and figured out exactly where they needed to go. But those students are still here, and COVID learning loss is not gone, especially in the area of math. That really is still present, but the funds are gone. The way out of this is, which I know we've talked about, is a strong multi-tiered system of supports, which has a lot of factors in play to develop it. It's looking at your schedule. It's making sure you have intervention teachers. It's ensuring that we're giving universal assessments, which we are. Dr. Bacon actually brought us iReady, which has been a real critical development for us to be able to implement an MTSS system. But it's a lot of work to do it, but you want to be able to have it because that type of service is more flexible and requires progress monitoring, and it's not as labor intensive and costly as special education. So we know the way out, but it's not a quick way out. And so we are on top of that. It's one of the goals of the Student Opportunity Act for Swampscott. You can kind of see this by grade level. Our elementary school, we're about 18.5%. Middle school's at 25.7%. That is a real number in that there are more students in our middle school who have been identified, but it's also, there's a little bit of a depression in the enrollment, right? Your enrollment used to be around 700 and it's about 600. And then the high school is at 20%. That's where we would like it to be. So again, we're going to really work hard to invest in a strong MTSS system.
So if the theory that if there were 700 kids in the school, that it would be probably
it would drop that down, but there is also a real number where the number is higher.
Okay.
So it's both. It may not be 25%. It's probably a little high because of the there are students who are in private schools at Shore.
Yeah.
And at charters.
Okay. Martha, could you just describe kind of what disability means? Is that people with IEPs plus XYZ?
So these are students on IEPs, so students with disabilities who also require specialized instruction. There are also students who have disabilities who do not require specialized instruction, but may require an accommodation, and those students will be on a 504 plan. They are not captured in this number.
Are they captured in the bar chart?
They are not captured there either, no.
So the bar chart is just kids?
Just students with IEPs.
Oh, okay.
Just students with IEPs.
And English language learners?
They are not captured there, though there are students who are English language learners and also may have a disability, so they could be captured in that way, but not.
Okay.
But no, because obviously being the English, we're about 5% of our students are English language learners. I know one thing you guys were talking about Linfield, one thing I was thinking in my head is that our socioeconomic state is far different than Linfield.
Mm-hmm.
We are about 20 to 23%. Low socioeconomic, they're about 10.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings some funds in, although now we're hovering on this little percentage number that unfortunately, the way the formula must be,
But probably what really brings the funds in is the mall.
Right.
Could be.
Yeah, we have them all.
I think that is me, right? That's it. Any questions about special education? I would say we are pretty good about the predicting end. It's just there's volatility.
Thank you, Martha.
All right, and so then just to wrap up the budget highlights to go through the district and preschool, you know, the large increases as we talked about before. But some of the other budget drivers there is the lead nurse is now considered a district-wide position. We also have reallocated our substitute costs to the actual building levels, as well as there's some support staff at the preschool that will be moving basically up to the kindergarten level as that class moves up as well. So I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent.
So I have the summary slide and the last slide. So basically the realities of our district. We continue to look for ways to offset our expenses by increasing, you know, our fees, as was spoken about earlier in the presentation. Athletic fees, but the whole building rental revamp. And one of the things on the second bullet I want to talk about is, as we looked historically through what were the budget increases that the school department worked within throughout the last 5 or 6 years, and when we were staying within the guidance of the 2% plus new growth. And it's interesting that when the years that we did that, we also had the ESSER funds. And so, yes, it might look like we were at 2.8% or 2.6%, but those ESSER funds really carried us through those lean years of our budget requests. And that ESSER money ended in FY24, and that was the last year that we used $400,000 for that. We are looking at creative ways, and we tried to share that with you, of sharing employees from our elementary school to our high school instead of trying to add FTEs. And in the collective bargaining agreement for teachers, it does allow for a teacher to add an additional 0.2 if they accept it. So, you know, looking at creative ways about sharing staff cross levels and potentially adding a 0.2 instead of adding an FTE are some of the ways that we look to be creative within. I do want to emphasize our enrollment is increasing ever so slightly, and our FTE count is holding steady, though, Eric, your point is very well taken that, you know, have we added ESPs? Have we added tutors because of the student needs? And that's something I'm interested in looking at. With special education costs increasing by 3.67%, the tuitions, that's already above the guidance of the town financial policy. And so it's very hard to stay within that. One of the things that Cheryl and I have done along with school committee is every day you pick up the paper and you look at districts like Marblehead, North Andover, Brookline, Lynnfield, and Brockton, and there have been significant budget deficits, payroll issues, student restraint issues, and lawsuits. And I've said to the committee this in my last year that I'm really proud to be handing over a well-oiled machine. It wasn't a well-oiled machine 11 years ago when I came in here, and I certainly didn't have the team I have here. And I'm really proud of, I know this budget, 4.79, is above the guidance, but I'm proud of the work that we've done. We're not hiding anything. Everything is transparent, as transparent can be. We have a big bucket of money in that administrative cost center, but we've tried to explain to you what that encompasses to the best of our predictability. And we get hit every day with, you know, up until what was it, yesterday's leadership team meeting, we thought the tuition rate was 3.42%, and then we found an email that said it was 3.67%, and then we got the email that said we're down $105,000 in Title I grant funding. Like, when we say it's so fluid, it really is fluid. And then we have the students that come in. Yes, 5 kids came in during the holiday break, and what were those student needs? Only we know. And so that changes everything. What we're presenting to you right now could change tomorrow. And I know it doesn't make business people in the business world or in the private sector feel comfortable, but that's the reality we live in. And we're not here about, making up stories. We're here about kids. And whatever their needs are, we're going to service them. And if we need a psychologist at the high school come next November, I'm going to counsel Jason to get that psychologist, and we'll rob Peter to pay Paul within the district and try to fund it. But if those kids need it, they're going to get it. And I'll just say one final thing, and I know I've said it in Tri-Chair, is probably one of the proudest things is building in these other pathways for kids. Mary Ellen, I'll never forget the question you asked me at that Tri-Chair. You asked us, what makes a great school district? And my answer is what my answer was that day. It is creating a school district that doesn't just meet the needs of the college track kids. It's a school district that meets the needs of every student, whether they're going to be a plumber or an electrician or a cosmetology student. It's meeting all of those needs and building programs within the district to keep our out-of-district kids within the district if we can come up with a cohort. So that was very off script, and I apologize, but it was heartfelt. And that concludes my presentation.
Great. So let's kind of start with this. From anyone from the Finance Committee, do you have any questions?
We kind of asked them along the way.
Great. Perfect.
Thank you, that was good.
That's
though.
what we
That's I was
want.
thinking.
Same thing, Mary Ellen, Select Board, anything that you have questions on for right now?
I think this is a lot of information to
Yep,
come out.
it is.
And it takes a while to really absorb it.
Yep.
Some of the questions that were asked about Linfield, the comparison, that was very interesting. The comments that are coming from the possibilities of what's going to happen with the cherry sheet, it's going to come out of the state. Those are big questions out there. And then just seeing what we can do. And I think that it's really important for the school committee to understand that the select board and the finance committee are your major fiduciary committees. And we have to look at numbers for now and for the future and what is sustainable. So I really appreciate your hard work and, your collaboration over the years. I've worked very closely with Pam and with Cheryl and with Martha. And, I just think it's going to take a little time for us to look at things. So, but I really appreciate your hard work.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the Select Board? Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I certainly want to echo what Mary Ellen said. This is extremely helpful, and it's been great to all get together and really read through this together. I do feel like there are a couple things here that are kind of the perennial, mechanics here in terms of the special ed reserve fund, and at this point, what I'm still not clear exactly why it really makes sense to have a special reserve fund as opposed to just assume we're going to have the costs and just build it in. Yeah, your percentage is going to go up a little bit, but it's just, I don't see there's a huge advantage to putting it one place or the other. Am I missing anything?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Okay.
We would prefer that.
Yeah,
as
I
well.
think the board here, committee would prefer that.
The idea of having a reserve fund really came back from the days when it would have been a reserve fund, when it is an emergency, and those monies weren't accounted for. But what it's become is a fund that we know we're going to tap into. It's sort of like free cash. Like, we know every year we're going to use free cash to balance next year's budget. So can we really say we don't use free cash to balance the budget? This is sort of like, is it really a stabilization fund if we're going into every year using it? And along with that, the idea that we have to spend down those reserves on our side is anxiety provoking, and it's difficult to swallow at a time when we see all sorts of reserve accounts being built up on the town side, for good reason, because you don't know what's going to come our way, and it feels as though the reserves that are being set up for the schools aren't really reserves. They're just a way to move the budget to make it look like there's less money being spent.
If you don't mind, just, Amy, you want to comment on it? Is there anything that, just in the interest of everyone being on the same page here, is there any particular reason from the town side or anything that we prefer it this way?
Yeah, so we built the reserve, wait.
Oh, yeah. I have two, yeah. Collecting them.
So when Carol and I worked on creating this reserve fund, it was with the intention of it being a reserve and having the Medicaid reimbursements building up that reserve year over year. And, hopefully, also, influxes of free cash or other town funds to continue bringing it up. And it is supposed to be there for, heaven forbid, another 14% increase year where, that can't really be absorbed. So much like the town stabilization funds, it's supposed to incrementally soften that blow so that everyone's just not getting knocked out of their seats at once.
I also just want to add to, when that was initially created at the time, there was a potential that that 14% might not come to fruition, right? And there was a lot of people pushing legislators to not have that come to fruition. And so at that point, because it was a bit of a unknown at that time, it made a lot of sense then to take that 14% increase, effectively put it in the reserve to get out of our budget in the event that it didn't happen, it wasn't built into the budget. And I also want to say that out of the $510,000 that the town has appropriated to the special education reserve, thus far, we have used 109 of it. I do anticipate using some of it this year as well. I don't know what that number will look like, but where it's not like we're using the full amount every year. Because Martha does have wonderful spreadsheets, but there's a portion of those spreadsheets that's 95% anticipated. And so when we're looking at tuitions, there are some that might not happen or could happen in December versus September. And so we budget what we think, but that fluctuates. And so there is variability in what we know and what we think is going to happen.
And that's one of the reasons that at the end of the day, when we go to town meeting, there's one number. That's why there's never a debate about a school budget on a town meeting.
But there
floor.
was.
What?
Present company excluded. But so we present one number. We don't get into someone standing in the audience and saying, well, can I see line item 172 of the second grade teacher who, made my child cry. That's why it doesn't work that way. It's one number at the end of the day. But Doug, it's a great question that you asked. That's right.
So I just have a question for you. Just so everybody understands, there's a reserve fund, and you didn't deplete the reserve fund, you just used X amount.
Correct.
Whereas Karen's suggestion of just taking all that and putting it into the budget, that would have been used in the budget.
No, that's not what she was saying.
No.
I'm asking.
No, I meant,
Just asking.
well, in the old style, it would have been in circuit breaker,
Correct.
where it can stay and can prepay. I mean, there's different things you can do. It's like a unique sort of fund. You can prepay the next year, and it was, best practice to do that. When we agreed to do the reserve fund, we were forced to pay that down to that low level. And so now we don't have that ability anymore. And I don't know that we're completely against a reserve fund, because that sounds like a great idea, because if you do have a crazy wild year, you have something to fall back on. But what's happening right now is we're dipping into it every year when we basically know we're going to need it, I guess.
I mean, look, we put $200,000 into it last year with a wink, wink, nod, nod. We're going to come and get it at the end of the year.
I also do want to, just to kind of give a little bit more information on the circuit breaker balance. Historically, you can never look at it from a dollar perspective and say what did we on average hold as a circuit breaker balance, because our circuit breaker revenue varies year to year. per the methodology for circuit breaker. And so what you really should look at, which I did look at, was what % of the balance have we historically kept in circuit breaker? And it was 74% historically, going back to 2012. So historically, the district, up until as of a few fiscal years, kept 74% of our allowable balance to carry forward to offset tuitions if needed.
So just to make sure I'm following you, Charlotte, at this point, that would be 74% of 2 million?
Correct.
And again, just to reiterate, anything in a circuit breaker can only go one way, and that's for special education.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the state sets it up. You know, the state sets it up that way to protect districts.
Tara?
Yeah, I have another question, just again about the collective bargaining agreement that's coming up. Could you just give us a timeline and kind of how this budget figures into that versus when town meeting happens, and just kind of a timeline and who the players are? This is my first year. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll let the school committee take that one.
So we've just started negotiations with, there's 3 units. There's the main teacher unit, and then there's 2 smaller units, smaller as in number of people. That's the ESPs and the tutors. In a perfect world, I think when we were talking as a group, the SEA and us, I would love to say we would come to a meeting of the minds come May. That's about as far as I'm going to go, I think, with that. I don't want to, A, jinx anything, or B, there's many things at play. As you know, we've all read, we've all watched the news. There's many things at play here that we don't know what's going to happen. You know, as Amy said, with the interest-based bargaining, there's great conversations, there's open conversations, there's open dialogue. But we're not, only after 3 meetings, we're not to the point of even guessing. I think we have a really good idea where we're going to end up, we hope. At the end of the day, it's just way, way too early. And there's many, many pushes and pulls and where this is going to all
But
shake
both
out.
sides have committed to 2 things.
Yes.
Meeting every week and targeting our goal of May to
Right.
get it done.
Right. So we do meet every Wednesday.
I think that it's important for everyone to be prepared, and this is the hard thing, I know, when you're talking to especially a finance committee, you know, which is, you know, you're in charge of the money, and it doesn't help to hear something like this, but we have an idea of where we think this is going to go, and like Martha, you know, have some best guesses, but if you open up any newspaper, you'll see where things have gone off the rails, and we are very hopeful, especially with the relationships that have been formed by our superintendent over the decade, that we are not headed in that direction. But, you know, we are working with, you know, our paraprofessionals don't have a living wage. And if you look up paraprofessionals in every district, you'll see this is a big issue right now. Like, I don't want to compare them to bus drivers, but like the bus drivers, it's a job that is nearly impossible to hire for right now, because the pay isn't appropriate, and I think the town needs to be prepared for anything, and that's scary. It's scary for us as school committee members, but we also are reading every newspaper that there is, trying to figure out what's happening in other districts and talking to our peers, and they're talking to their peers, trying to figure out what's happening. But this is a tidal change in education that I think it was you, Martha, that was talking before about, you know, this is a tidal change, and teachers right now are in the position, unlike 10 years ago, when I think Jason spoke about it really well during his interviews. When you had to cut a teacher, you knew that when the money came back that you could hire a new teacher. Whereas now, when you have to lay off a teacher, that teacher probably hasn't gone on to teaching, they've probably gone on to the private sector. So they're not replaceable, and we have open positions, especially open positions when you're not offering a living wage.
Right.
And when I say that, I mean like, $32,000 a year.
Yeah, Tara, we just don't know. We don't know.
In theory, by the time town meeting happens, there will be some kind of resolution?
We hope so.
Okay.
That's the goal. Everyone in that room has agreed that if at all possible, by, the regular town meeting, we will have an understanding. But as everyone in here has watched the news, we don't know, but that's the goal.
So importantly, teacher contracts do not go to town meeting for a vote. They are ratified by the school committee, but there are conversations happening all the time, particularly at the tri-chair meeting, so that nobody's in the dark about expectations. So it's not like you're gonna all of a sudden one day hear about it.
Sure. Okay. Anything else from anyone?
So I just had a comment. I just want to thank Cheryl for a really informative, enlightening, educational presentation. It was wonderful, and it was really not too simplistic, and certainly answered a lot of questions that I think people had. So really well done, and just thanks to you. And this is the first time I think I've ever seen these three groups collaborate at this level, and it's refreshing, and I think we're off to a great start. So thank you all for inviting us, and
Sure.
Again, thank you for the information, because it was really great.
Thank you.
Well
Thank
done.
you all for coming.
If you, depends.
Well, I mean, so I would like to say, I really agree with you, and I'm really happy that we're all sitting here. It's hard to swallow, though, that we were in, a town meeting in May, talking about a financial summit that never happened. So I feel like we're really late in the game to be talking about our concerns about excess levy capacity, and which is going to come into play for the teachers, I can tell you that categorically. And it's, when we talk about what our budget is and what our ask is for, there was a lot of talk last year about a reset. That conversation hasn't happened this year, and it's disappointing because Eric Hartman stood up at town meeting 2 years ago and said that he questions whether or not the town, the financial policy can sustain services. And I don't know if the answer is yes or no, but I do know that we didn't have the conversation again, and that's disappointing.
I'm just going to reiterate what you said, too. I think this is great. I think it's great to have all three boards together. It's great to have the tri-chair meetings. It's great to see everybody. I see all the wheels turning as to how we can accomplish these goals. We also know we're not the only folks you're dealing with here, right? You have other contracts, you have other units, you have other things that you have to deal with other than the school department. So I appreciate the 3 hours you guys have spent. We're here to answer any question you have. There's no such thing as a bad question. If something comes up, let Cheryl, let Pam, let myself know, let us all know, and we'll try to do our best to get you those answers.
Well, can we funnel their questions through the
Yeah,
chair?
sure. So, okay. So, there we go. There you go. So
That
just,
would be nice.
so I will make sure that I will, any questions you have.
After the
thank
amount
you.
of emails that
Right,
were
there
coming
we
in
go.
today.
Right. So just, please, send them to me and I'll burst them out and we'll get an answer for you.
Yeah,
Because
that'd be great.
more than likely, the questions you have, I guarantee you 1 or 5 of us have those identically the same questions. So
When are we
with,
scheduled for our first budget hearing?
The public hearing is February 6th.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the next meeting.
all right, so with that, we'll get there. Okay. Mary Ellen, if you want to dissolve your or you can stay, you guys can stay. It's completely up to you. We have other business to do.
So can I have a motion? Second? All in favor? Aye.
Finance Committee?
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All right.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. You guys can stay, not stay, it's fine, we're gonna wrap. Thank you so much again.
Leadership team can go if you want.
When is the public comment? I want to see how long.
Coming up.
Yeah. Tell me.
One more time.
Good job, Cheryl. I didn't want to keep saying it.
Thank you.
Making it all just last longer. But thank you. Thank you.
Conversation.
Because it is always nice.
They're really clear about it.
All right, when I'm gummy bears at.
Two.
Once we go, like, forward.
So not in this one.
Joe. One thing I saw, read that. I know, I saw it.
I would like to do it again, less formal and more sharp.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, we have no subcommittee tonight. We're in
Like, if they're gonna still stay, if they're gonna go, get out, like, we gotta get on with this.
That's it. Just give it. It's over.
All right, for those who are staying, thank you. We have no, we're having a little technology issue on the policy update, so we're gonna do that next time.
Not you, not Joe.
No, right, the cell phone thing will eventually go away.
Eventually.
So we have public comment, and if anyone's here, if you could just sign in.
I don't think we have a sign sheet, we'll write it down. Mara, are you gonna come down? All right.
So Jess, let me just read this. If someone has something to say in public comment to the school committee, we allot like 15 minutes.
What? Wait, 15 minutes.
3 minutes to chat on public comment per person. Sorry, my brain's a little fried here. Okay.
15 minutes?
That's what it says.
Come over there.
We allot 15 minutes for public comment and allow each, just make it 3 minutes.
All right.
I've had way not enough chocolate. Go ahead.
All right. Hi, folks. Mara Lau at Liff Road. So I just wanted to come to speak tonight on this important issue. I want to just remind everybody on these three really important boards about our magnificent students that are behind all of these dollars. And I think that that's just kind of the point that I want to push, to make folks realize that there's things that our students come to school for well beyond physics and chemistry, right? They're coming here for athletics, they're coming here for band, they're coming here for chorus, they're coming for theater. It's so thrilling to watch Big Blue News, you know, Mr. Dulette's crowd. It was wonderful even during Thanksgiving to see some of the students at Fenway. It was just wonderful. You know, when you're around as long as many of us have been, you just see kids grow up. And to see them, you know, standing up and becoming adults and having opportunities. The district is creating opportunities for our students. And that just leads to so many important moments for them to build upon later on. And so I just want everybody to keep in mind that those dollars that are so important for us support our students in all of those ways. Robotics, Sam's already gone, but I dug up my robotics pin for him. It's, as you know, one of my favorite programs that happens at the high school that services every learner. You know, it's well beyond robotics. It taps our students who are creative. It taps our students who are organized. It You know, it just, it's a great program, but obviously we know it's an expensive program. So we're going to be, you know, kind of pursuing some ways to help financially support that a little bit further. I just wanted to also point out that our superpower has always been our small class sizes. I do not want to see us lose that. We have at times. Our freshmen, again, 30 in a math class, it's just too much. It's just too much, especially when Ms. Raymond was speaking about, you know, math is still, we're still lagging. If we can also back to the Title I, I think we all need to do better, or the district needs to do better about pointing out the changes financially. So I think parents need to realize, okay, if those forms are not getting filled out, we're not getting dollars. Mm-hmm. How can we go about that better so that maybe we have families out there that are meeting that threshold, but where we have, you know, all of our meals are provided now by the state, people don't feel like they need to fill that form out any longer, and that's affecting our, you know, our Fed dollars. That needs to be, people need to know that. We need to teach people that. Okay, and then going back to the capital, all those computers, they need maintenance, right? So that's hitting our budget. So that's something certainly to keep in mind. In wrapping, I just want to make sure we don't go back to no nurses in our schools eventually.
We can't.
We can't. For 100,000 reasons, but we've been there.
We have.
We've been there for multiple years. Closures of libraries in all of our buildings. That was a really unfortunate, terrible time in our Swampscott history. And Ms. Angelakis, I really do give you full credit for, you know, being a pin to turn that all around. And I know good work will continue. But dollars keep us all going. So if we could kind of think about ways that the town and the school could do a better job collaborating, that's important. It needs to happen.
You just reiterated my entire tenure. Like I just relived my whole day.
That's okay. If it wasn't so late and I didn't need a drink of water,
I have another half hour for you.
But if we could just remember that there are students behind all of these dollars, and I think that's the most important thing.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mark. I see anyone else here? Is there anyone online? Hold on one sec as we check the technology. Anyone raise your hand online? Don't be shy. Feel free. We'd love to chat. I don't see anyone. Okay. Next on our agenda is a couple donations. Suzanne, would you like to read them? No? Okay.
Can you see my computer open?
Wow.
No.
All right, here we go. We have two donations tonight. The first is from Peter and Rebecca Spelios. They live in Swampscott. So the source of funding is from the Spelios family, $8,000. And I'd like to read the description. The purpose and the conditions of the donations are as follows. Students of Color Alliance, $1,000. Robotics, $1,000. Genders and Sexuality Alliance, $1,000. Unified Discovery Club, Emily Borden, $1,000. The band at SHS, another $1,000. Drama Club at SHS, $1,000. And Chorus at SHS, $1,000. Film and TV Club, $1,000. Again, that's $8,000 donation from Peter and Rebecca Spelios. Heartfelt thank you. That is incredibly generous of your family. We really appreciate that. Can someone, please make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Oh, thank you. Second. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Again, to Peter and Rebecca, thank you so much. It's incredibly generous. Wow, there you go. I'll sign that.
Thank you.
Next, I'm going to butcher the name, so I'm going to apologize in advance.
Metaxatos.
Exactly. This is for a manufacturing teacher at SHS. Peter
Paul Metaxatos.
Paul Metaxatos.
Metaxatos, the owner of Motive Design Firm in Boston. It's incredible, really. The donation is $1,479.99. It's for a Snapmaker J1S 3D printer. You got to check out this printer. It is, wow, it is really pretty cool. Just to read the description, it's a new 3D printer, has been donated by the Motif Design Firm for use at Swampscott High School's Advanced Manufacturing Program. Motive Design Firm did not use the specific machine and generously donated it to the program. Again, very generous. This just shows our population in this town is just so invested in our community. So can someone please make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Someone second?
Second.
All those in favor? And it passes.
I just want to say, Paul Metaxatos continues to be generous, not only in gifts like this, but he has been a very active supporter of the program in general. He is a mentor. He has made presentations here, has had kids to his company, and is an asset to the program.
Thank you. All right, and then lastly, there's really only one thing on the consent agenda, so I'd like to have someone make a motion to approve the regular session minutes of January 9th, 2025.
I'll make the motion.
Someone second? All those in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously, and can...
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All those in favor? And we are out.